Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a link down. You can actually join the conversation. If you're here as an attendee and you see all these panelists and you during the show, you feel like you could have contributed something, you probably could. And we'd love to have you. So if you can come a little earlier, we open at 6. You don't have to come at 6, but we start at 6 and we talk about all kinds of things. It's kind of meandering conversation until about 6:40. 6:40, we distribute the Discord link. So there's almost 800 of us keep talking about all of this stuff between shows. You have to be here early to get the Discord link. And then we start mic checks. Once we start mic checks, we're not going to take any other panelists. So if you're interested in being on the panel, we'd love to have you. Just make sure you've got good video, good audio, good internet, and that you feel like you can contribute something to our conversation. But you're more than welcome to, everyone's welcome to come and join. So hopefully we'll see you here. If for the second hour, typically we have specials, but right now what we're going to do is we're going to look at there's an audio summit or a sound summit. It's coming up today, so we'll do that. And then tomorrow's education, Saturday's education. And then we're going to start the new season, so to speak, next week, where we have a lot more second hours. And so stay tuned for that. If you have questions, this is the time to ask. So, you are driving the conversation. You set up the run of show as the attendees. So the questions that you ask, the questions that you vote on, that really just drives what we talk about. So for this next hour, we're going to be talking about whatever you ask. And then the second hour, we're going to look at the Sound Summit and talk about summits. We'll talk about a bunch of things there. I mean, before it, I thought it was a useful conversation. Before we started here, we were talking a little bit about the Google Sound Summit, and Kev had some strong opinions. What were your thoughts, Kev? Caught him off guard. He didn't even see that coming. Nope, you're still muted.
I was impressed. No, I would like people to look me in the eye when they're trying to sell me things.
That's good. That's the most efficient dig I've seen on that. Yeah. So, I think that it was an interesting choice to not have everybody to do a pre-built show where everyone is clearly looking off screen. I looked at it. I don't have any. I can't calculate why.
Me neither.
I'd love to
directing by committee.
No, definitely somebody had a clear vision of what they wanted to do. That wasn't done by accident. I just
that's what
don't quite understand the process. There. I mean, it's an interesting choice. So, but it's worth checking out. Maybe we'll discuss it more if people ask questions or have comments. But we're going to pay more attention as we move forward on virtual events. So if a virtual event comes out, definitely let us know. Bring it up in the morning. Keep your eye out, whether it's Tesla or Google. We'll try to watch some of them if they're happening during our time. We'll try to in November on. I'd be open to setting up some extra hours where we kind of do Mystery Science Theater on it, which kind of what we're going to do in about an hour. But let's just keep more. I think we need to keep on watching what people are doing. I don't think anybody's doing it very well. I mean, and again, I think that even I am doing the best I can, working on these. I mean, there's so many. Anytime you work on a larger event, there's just so many cooks in the kitchen that it's hard to get a good meal out. So you do the best you can. Every one of them is some version of a compromise to get those things out. Chris, can we go ahead and can I throw you into the
Yeah, sure. I'm going to have to bug out at about 7:30, but I'll gladly play along.
Sounds good. Well, Bill take over after that.
Okay, so the first question is from Ed Wilcock from Valley Cottage, New York. Alex, you've talked about duration of views being more important than the number of views. He's talking about, people watching this show primarily, I think. What metrics, if any, are available on Zoom for measuring the office hour viewership, or are you using another method to measure that?
There's a lot of data in Zoom. So there's Zoom has everybody's entry point and exit point. So with a little bit of work, you can get a pretty good idea of exactly how it's actually Zoom's far more accurate than YouTube or Facebook or whatever, because they're all dealing with IPs and those can be wandering around and so on and so forth. I mean, Facebook has a better idea of it, but they don't at least give us that data. They don't give us the data that they have related to this process, but Zoom does. So we have a pretty good idea of when people enter, when people leave. I just do about once a week. I do an arduous process that's not automated, that could be automated. I just haven't done it yet, to kind of just see kind of roughly where our and I do it very quickly, so it's not precise, but it's plus or minus 5 minutes. And so I just get an idea of how long people are staying, for those kinds of things. I could, if I decided, like, for instance, look at how long Chris stays and how many minutes that he spends in office hours. And then I could give him a hard time about it. But I don't, all I'm interested in really is average view time.
Oh, wait, my mom's calling. I forgot my lunch. I have to go.
It does give you a lot of that information. The amount of information is pretty amazing, actually, in the webinar platform. So, but I think that that's how I'm doing it right now. I definitely I haven't had time, as I said recently, over and over and over again. I've been really, really busy. I've gone down from insanely busy as of yesterday to just mostly really busy now. So probably in November I will spend some time like building some scripts that will give me more data. One of the things I'm interested in is, so I have average view time, as I said, is interesting, but also entry time. But then the other thing that no one gives me data on, that I have the raw data to do, is exits. So when are people leaving? So when you look at the stats that you see on YouTube or Facebook and you see concurrent viewers, the concurrent viewers, people think of it as, well, people are staying or they're leaving or whatever, but it's really just the equilibrium between people entering and exiting. So it's this kind of average every day, every moment. And so you have to think about that, because you want to look at when did everyone leave, because you might have marketing or something else, someone posts something, so it may look like it's going up, but a whole bunch of people left at a certain time. And so separating those stats out, I think will be interesting and I just haven't had time to do the process. Go ahead, Chris.
And that data is only available on webinar, or can you get any of that on a meeting? Or
I think it's only in webinar.
I guess
I don't think that
and
the meetings have any of that.
At what level is it? Just
I think if you have a paid webinar thing, it will give you all that data. Yeah, it's not just, but the webinar is keeps track of a lot of things.
And does it come to you as like a CVS file that you can manipulate and manage?
CVS.
Cool.
And there's lots. There's attendee reports. There's, everyone signed up. I have, everybody that left, everybody that stayed.
Screen time per individual?
Yep. Not screen time. It doesn't give me that I know of. It gives me how long everybody's in the meeting.
Does it measure how much they talk and how many times they interrupt you?
I'd love that. That would be great. I'd be like, Chris interrupts me a lot. Maybe I just give him a mute button.
Boot.
All right. Next question.
Next question. Mr. Preto says, Alex, if you were going to build out a studio from scratch today, what path would you take? 4 cameras, 2 studios, 2 PTZs, and which lenses, switcher, routers, recorders? What would you do if you were charged with building a studio from scratch?
And John, you were talking about 2 studios or 1 studio?
No, we got an RFP yesterday from LVCA, the Convention Authority, and they want to build a studio out, and they want to go all high-end gear. So, would you go with the 12K Black Magics and put 2 of them on PTZ heads?
I wouldn't use the 12Ks. They're kind of until I test them. But the problem with the 12K cameras, in my opinion, is that the only thing you'd want to shoot on them is 12K. They're doing subsampling they're subsampling they spent all this money on this and all this time on that chip, so that they could grab 8K or 4K in real time without having to scale it. The problem is that you should never do that, because of the way that they're, they slyly talk about the fact that they're like, well, it won't look the same as. That means that you can't oversample. You want to have an oversampled image. If you're going to shoot 12K or 8K, you want to have an oversampled image so that when you go down, it's going to, clean everything up. You're going to get a cleaner image. You're going to get less grain. That's what you want. So since I'm not going to be able to get that from that camera doesn't mean anything to me. And so maybe I'll shoot interviews like what I did. I shot all my interviews over the last 2 weeks with my 6K, and the images are amazing. Great DP, but the images are amazing. And so I don't, so I have to admit that I would still like my camera of choice for live right now at any price. Well, I mean, not at any price. I mean, I'd love to put some Aries or a bunch of Venices, into a studio, but that would be absurd. So
whoa, did you just say something would be absurd?
yeah, exactly.
Somebody mark the time code here.
So I'd rather, the thing is that I'm really happy with I'm super happy. We've done so many studios with the Blackmagic Mini Ursas that I'm super happy with how they work as far as automation and shading and all the bits and pieces. Now with those what really makes a difference is the glass. And so we use the Cabrillo lenses. The Fujinon Cabrillo lenses are great motorized lenses that they look great. I think that the smaller ones, and I can't remember whether they're like 20 to 90s or 30 to 90, 19 to 90s, I think 19 to 90s. Those are about 10K. And then you want a couple long lenses, which I think that they're like 70 to 300 or 320 or something like that. One or two of those, but those are like $30,000 each, so I spend money on glass, not as much money on the sensor. If they want to go really high end, I mean, they just have to decide how high end that is. I mean, do they want to get a Grass Valley switcher? The problem really gets into when you're dealing with building that studio is get a Grass or you get a Sony switcher. The issue you get into is now you've limited the number of people that can actually run it. This is the problem that YouTube got into when they built their studios. They built it with Carbonite. The problem is the learning curve for a Carbonite versus the learning curve for an ATEM, very different. And so there are some limitations with the ATEM on the number of super sources that you can run and everything else, and the transition between the super sources becomes a little bit of a challenge if people want lots of them. I think that I would have to know a little bit more. I wouldn't say that if they tell me that I've got $10 million to do the back end of it, then we can talk about Grass and Sony and all kinds of other things. I don't like 2/3. I don't believe in building studios with 2/3 inch chips. I don't believe in using 2/3 inch chips are great for 75 feet or more. So if you're doing a show that's a longer throw and you need to put a box lens on it, then you need more depth of field, then a 2/3 show makes sense. Everything under 75 feet I do with Super 35. I find that full frame is too hard to deal with. The depth of field is too much, or too short. But the Super 35 is this great in between. And what it does is it makes your studio feel bigger because you've got half the depth of field that you would have with a 2/3 inch chip. And so everything feels better. The tricky part of studios, of course, I do like the Airy light systems. if you're gonna have like the highest end stuff, the Airy light systems are pretty good. The next step down for me from there would be probably I'm really happy with the Nan lights that I have. That's from a cost effective perspective. They've got a lot of different, options there. The big thing is for them to think about how big that studio is. That also drives the lighting. So I find that what I want is about a 30 by 40 studio space. I built one in 18 by 25 and felt that it was, was too short, too small.
It's 30 by 40. That's exactly the number.
Yeah. So that's the right size. You want to put a grid, you want to drop a grid. The big thing is make sure that the grid is lowerable. If you're going to put that's a place to put money is in the winch, or the lift is really just life changing because you will. The thing to think about as you build these things is that as you build them, the thing you want to consider is when you make something hard to change, you don't change it very often. So you actually become less creative. So things that are hard to deal with makes you less creative because you're like, like when you have a grid that you have to use a ladder all the time, you just don't change it very much. When you can pull it down all the time, you just, every show is different, and you're in this creative mode of doing lots of things that are cool with it. So I'm a big fan of obviously DMX control. Every light should be DMX'd and, you can decide whether you're going to put some movers up there or not, but otherwise, you can generally build them out with a mixture of either the Aries or the Nan lights would be good. I'm a big fan, obviously, of Clearcom. I think that they're the right mix of hardware, software, IP. you know, all the things are there. I don't think that anybody else has that whole solution from an iPhone all the way to the hardware panels. And the FreeSpeak, I think, is still the best wireless that you can get. So FreeSpeak 2, not FreeSpeak 1. And so, and then as far as those go, I'm still a big, you know, I would still build every studio I do. The only thing that I won't get right now from Blackmagic is the routers. Because they're too small. So 12G routers, you know, Utah Scientific is probably the best cost-effective version of 256 by 256. The Ross, for some reason the name of it is dropped out, is a really nice, very modular router, but it's, you know, it's more expensive. I mean, the Blackmagic ones are in this 5K range. I think the Utah Scientific is like 256 by 256 is 80 grand or something, and the Ross is $150,000 for the router. You'll want to think about patch panels for everything. You want to have patches. I use Bittree non-normal patches, and PEDs, lots of PEDs. You know, for all your cameras. You know, make sure that they're easy to move around. Make sure that they're easy to adjust. I would rather spend less money on things like the switcher and the routers and everything else, and then buy for a studio where you're really going to get money is motorized precision arms. So, and telemetrics heads, so that you have most of the stuff on telemetrics heads, and then you put motorized precision. You have one or two of those. It'll change everything about your studio. And you don't have any operators. You just program it. So, and when you think about COVID, you know, type productions, you want to think about it's not a matter of money, it's how do you minimize the number of people in the room, you know? And so you want all of everything. Telemetrics heads are in my opinion, the best that you can, you know, get to put on those PEDs. Anyway, that's my 2 cents at least. And we can talk more offline, but that's, obviously I have to do that relatively often. I think I'm designing a 3-room studio. Oh, last thing. The hardest thing to do in the studio is the set. So, you know, the problem you get into is you get all this tech stuff done, and then you get a set that either looks like Between Two Ferns, or it's really expensive to set up as a raw set. I build sets with an 80-20 substructure and magnets, and you can swap the sets in a couple hours. That's the way to do that. So anyway, that's a whole nother. So you want to be able to have something that the set is modular. Building whatever you're going to do, you want to be able to pull the set completely apart. And you should, if it takes longer than 3 hours, you have a problem for that kind of set, because they're going to have lots of different clients, you know, and they're going to want to pop it out and pop it back in. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. Stuart, and then Paul, and then Sky.
I can't believe you've missed something in that answer, Alex.
Sorry?
I'll come back to that. You've missed something, and I'll come back to it. But included in what you were just saying, you actually kind of covered a question that was asked in the chat about lenses for 75 to 95 feet and the ENG lenses. But I could also say DSLR lenses. But two things that I noticed. Cabrio. I've never heard it said the way you describe the lens, but then again, here we say niche instead of.
Yeah, I have no idea if I'm saying it right. We just call them Cabrio lenses, but they could be Cabrio.
Yeah, it's a new word. I've never heard it said that way, and it's like another difference between US and Australia.
Or it might not be. It could literally be. I've never talked to anyone at Fujinon, so it literally could just be the way I say it. It doesn't necessarily. I wouldn't make it as an American.
Cabrio the same way a car is, with the roof that folds down. But what I noticed you missed is the door. The biggest door you can put on a studio will save you so much money, where you could back a truck up and offload everything into it.
Good point.
If your studio is anywhere else but the ground floor, the door and the access becomes so critical, and you waste so much time and money getting stuff in and out.
Yeah, you definitely want to at least have double doors that will open up that you can drive a car into. If it's on the first floor, as you said, that's great. If it's not, then you just want to know if you have access to a freight elevator that'll carry a car. I mean, if it's in Moscone, not Moscone, LVCC, they have lots of. getting from one floor to the other is a totally doable thing. And then the other thing is just really think about the sound and whether they can float the room. You know, that's something you can't do later. So it is the first thing that you want to do is to float the room, and in a place like LVCC, I would put a lot of air in it. So a lot of lead and a lot of air, like 1.5 feet if I could, in that size. I would give up some space and do 1.5 feet of sealed air inside of with lead lined, because you have so much. The hardest part you're going to have in LVCC is low rumble, because you have all this big. Well, we don't have it right now, but if you're going to build the studio thinking out into the future, you're going to want to think about the fact that there's going to be a lot of big things rolling in, and you're going to be trying to shoot shows while they're loading in for a convention, and so, and I'm just guessing right now, but there's people that can do the math of exactly how big that float has to be, but you really need to stop. It's the sub 200 hertz that is just, devastating, for the stuff. Now you can roll off your mics to get rid of a lot of it. So, I mean, at that range, so you can do some of it on your own, but the best thing about, it's just floating rooms is kind of life-changing as well. When it comes to building these studios, you just don't worry about what's out there.
Plus at LVCC, you've got traffic under that area between Central and South Hall. So you're going to have literally capping traffic noise.
So, but yeah, you're right as far as that goes. And then there's lots of, we can, happy to talk with you about it offline as well. There's a lot of bits and pieces, but I tend to spend less money in some places and a lot more money on other places just because of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Because I assume that what you're looking for is A, to be able to build virtual events, and B, the ability to support physical events when they come back. And we've been talking to convention centers.
That's correct.
Yeah. Because we've been talking to convention centers about that for 15 years. Like that you should be building studios into your, like Moscone, and I talked to someone at LVCC years ago about the fact that they need to do that. And so it's a really smart move on their part. And the thing that'll kill them is the set if they don't figure out a way to make it really modular, because the clients won't want to pay $35,000 to put up a set. And if they don't pay $35,000 to put up a set, it's going to look like crap, and so that's the, and so you want to build something that doesn't cost that, and possibly modular in a way that they can be stored. So you can have people who come back over and over again, or you have like 10 different sets that they can just pick. And then you put modular things on them so that you can put their logo on it or whatever, but they don't want it to look like everybody else's set. And that became like a huge issue for us as we built sets that have multiple shows going through. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, you led right into where I was wondering why wouldn't you put up a big LED back wall?
They asked for an LED back wall, but you know what happens when those are used.
I would say that you might be able to pull off an LED back wall. The problem really is that it feels very sterile. People think that they want that, but it really doesn't feel great when you're in front of those. It's cheap and easy. It's not cheap. You can't go over 0.9 pitch in a studio.
There we go.
So
you have to do that.
So you're, 0.9 is the high end is the largest, and people will put something in. You really want 0.7. And then even then you need, typically you need 8 to 10 feet, of throw between them to let that soften out behind them. Otherwise you're going to get moire patterns. And the other problem is that the LED wall itself defeats the temporal compression. So if you can't get it to depth of field to a point where all the pixels, and I don't mean kind of, but completely, all the LED points have to completely blend together. If there's any texture back there, it'll destroy all of the temporal compression on a live stream. And then what it does is it just has to go hunting for spatial compression. And that means it just blows up, and you might the final later might look okay, but the live version, when it had to do it in real time, you have the foreground macro blocking, you have the background macro blocking, and then that doesn't even count the fact that you'll have certain zoom lengths you can't use. Like we have shows with LED walls where we're throwing away, 60% of the shots to get past the moire, so that's the real challenge with LED right now. Paul?
Yeah, I've got some land. I'm here in Texas, no restrictions. I'm trying to visualize. I might build this. So 30 by 40, what kind of walls, what kind of roof?
Let's do a second hour on studios.
How high are the ceilings?
We've sucked up like 20 minutes on one question. What we should do is we'll put a second hour in, and I've got some ideas of where, maybe even Monday, we'll do a second hour just talking about studios. Because
I just want to visualize the
frame. We'll talk about studios, and I'll show some pictures.
Okay, good deal.
Yep. Okay.
Well, and the power usage in the HVAC, which is now different because of all of the LED. We don't have the big hot lights like we used to.
Can't have enough AC and you can't have enough power. Like it's impossible. But in the LVCC, you won't have a problem. But 400 amp three phase is what I put in. Anyway, Stephen.
I think the room's small, little too small for the LED wall with those lenses too. You're going to pick them up. It's just too small.
Yep. That's what a lot of people are trying to do, but it seems like a good idea. It's not. Next question.
I was doing a loading once at the Yerba Buena Gardens at Moscone, and I pulled up in my van, and the guy looked at my van, and he goes, because we were going to the 3rd floor, and he goes, "Here, just back it in here. I'll take you up to the 3rd floor." It was quite handy. Big elevators are fun. It was the easiest load in ever. Ed Willick says, has anyone on the panel used the new GoPro Hero 9 yet? Thoughts on the 3.0 image stabilization over the previous version, the battery life and overheating, and again, how to pronounce Willock. Willock.
I'm actually, it's the first one I'm excited about. I just haven't had a reason to buy it yet. Like I don't have a show that I need it for. It's usually when I buy things. I would love to test it, put it through its paces, but I haven't. It looks interesting. The stabilization looks cool. The image quality. I mean, there's a lot of things about it. I feel like it's the first one since the 5 that I was like, oh, maybe I should get a GoPro again. I like the front facing screen for a lot of things, but I don't. Has anyone used it yet? No. Okay, well, I guess we'll move on. We think it looks cool from the outside, but we haven't seen it.
Mr. Mobley says, what was the inexpensive lighting that Rosco Jones talked about yesterday?
What are you using, Rosco?
I'm trying to think what. Sorry, my brain is
China balls.
He may have been talking about
China ball.
Oh yeah, China balls. Sorry. No, China balls are just a nice big soft light, and you can buy a 5-pack. I put the links in for yesterday, so I think they'll come up. But it's just you can dim them, and they don't pulse or anything like that. So China balls.
For a person sitting at a desk, what dimension would you use?
16. I always use anything smaller than a 16. You just don't get the broadness to it. What you're looking for is a large light source too. You don't want a focused light source. You want a nice big broad light source. So anything above 16.
Oh, come on, get a 60-inch.
Our first Final Cut user groups were done with I think a 36-inch. Or maybe it was a 48-inch, and we had 5 of the like these 125 watt little CFLs, and it was bright and soft, and it worked great. And then we replaced it with an Airstar, which was in some cases better, but made more noise. So it actually
is a big China ball, though. It's just a giant.
Airstars are giant China balls, 6-foot China balls, which are they're nifty. But the first ones were done with literally just a China ball, and we bought a couple of them because they do tear. They're made out of paper, so you have a tendency to tear them if you're not careful. Next question.
I'll read this one, then I'm going to have to leave. But Gregory Wheeler says, what is an inexpensive long throw lens for a 75 to 95 foot throw using a Blackmagic Design Micro Studio 4K?
Go ahead, Stuart.
I had a quick look at the camera and just to be confirmed, and that's one of the ones with the Micro 4/3.
That's correct.
Flange on it. So if they're looking at a cheap lens and what have you, you can get mechanical adapters to go to most DSLR lenses that will pass through the camera control now. So a cheap Sigma lens or a cheap Canon lens, just a normal DSLR, if you've got enough light. Because the cheaper your lens goes, the slower the lens goes, especially on zooms. So you need to make sure you've got enough light there before you start looking at cheap.
The other thing to remember is that this is where rentals make a big difference, because if you're not going to use it every day, it is really hard to. I mean, if you're going to use it all the time, then look for a cheaper lens. Well, I would say if you're using it all the time, I'd save up for a better lens. But if you're using it for an event every week or an event every month or whatever, there's some point where that doesn't make sense, and you can just rent the lens. And you rent like a 100 to 400 Canon. It's very inexpensive on like a borrow lenses type thing. It's very inexpensive. Remember there's a magnifier to it. So the 100 to 400 is like, I think it's like 150 to 600 or something. And then you can put a doubler on it, which you'll lose a little light, but you can go even further. So there's a bunch of options there to get a pretty long throw, but I would look at renting them. And then, to see which ones work for you. Renting lenses has become very easy and cheap. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for that long throw, I would look at like the 400 to 500 mil range minimum, depending on how tight you want to go. But yeah, teleconverters will help as well.
Rosco?
Yeah, my only thing about renting with the Micro Four Thirds is those adapters don't always work perfectly with all lenses, and so
I would buy the adapter.
Right, but you still have to buy the right one and make sure it works with the rental lens. So it's just adding an element that I'd avoid. Panasonic has a 30 to 100 2.8.
That wouldn't be enough for 75 feet though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you need, it depends on what you're trying to get. Like when we look at 75 feet, we're trying to get this frame that I have. Like I need to be able to know that I can get to this frame, and this frame on a Super 35 is about between 800 and 1,000 millimeter, throw to get there. I mean, that's what that takes.
On a Micro Four Thirds, 400 to 500 mil range.
Yeah.
Olympus has a recently announced 100 to 400 mil 5 to 6.3 lens.
And that would that'd be like waist up if you're doing a stage thing. If you're doing something else, it might work fine. Sky.
What do you use to stabilize the camera mount back in the back of the hall? I've seen these spider things, but usually that's what kills you is somebody's walking past or the floor stability.
There's a couple things. I mean, the spiders help a little bit, but they are definitely at that distance they start to shake a lot. The big thing is the first thing you do is you request that the operator riser and the camera riser are separate by. It just needs to be an inch. Then you also want to make sure that they stanchion off your area so that people can't touch it. So you want them to be a foot away from your area there. And then, those are the big things. Then you also want a big head. So like on a big one in the back, we want like a Sackler or like a 2575 or 2060, O'Connor 2060. Big heads mean that your moves are going to be nice and smooth. If you get the tension right, you're going to get nice moves. You want to move all those controls to the handles, so you don't want people reaching up and grabbing stuff. So you can you pull all those controls back to the handles, which you can do there. That's going to make it a little easier. Operators, when if they're on somebody, they have to learn to take their hands off the camera. So like they just their hands on the camera on a long throw is going to create it. Now a lot of these lenses have image stabilization, and that's gotten pretty good. The early ones would roam around a little bit, but the newer ones have relatively good for the micro stuff. And then the all-in version is a chunk of concrete inside of 6 inches of sand underneath the camera tripod. So the camera sits on the concrete sits in the sand inside of the thing, and you have to lower that one in with a crane. Like you have to build it all. It's a thing. You lay out the sand, and then you set the concrete down, and then you put the sand around it again, and that's how you get rock solid from in a location for like a political tour. Anyway, Stuart, and then Bill.
I'm just looking for an eBay link that I'll put in the chat in a second. For budget level, where you want to use a ENG style lens on such a camera with Micro Four Thirds, there is a US seller on eBay called Rare Adapters that will do a B4 to Micro Four Thirds adapter with a focal reducer or tele-expander built in, so you can get full image coverage over the sensor. Like I said, I'll put a link in it's a budget level one, not a broadcast or an Alex level.
Yeah, I mean,
one.
The big thing is when you go from B4 to 4/3, you tend to get a little softness. I mean, that's always the challenge. It's just the lenses aren't built for that. Bill?
I owned a spider pod for probably 15 years while I was shooting a lot of conference stuff. And there's one brilliant thing about them. And for those of you who've never seen one, it's basically a fold-outable three-legged thing that a tripod goes on, and then it has a folding platform behind that. So the operator is decoupled from what is holding the tripod. But the biggest plus is any box kind of thing I've ever put a camera on, somebody wants to come and sit on it or something like that. And the brilliance of the spider pod is that it has three little tiny legs, and it's impossible for anybody to mess with unless they run into it.
That's why we stanchion ours off.
Yeah, stanchions, you got to do something, because you put any flat surface out there and some knucklehead is going to want to come and plop their rear end on it.
Mickey?
Yeah, Gregory just mentioned in the chat that the cameras will be mounted on a wall, so I assume the lenses he needs would be fully servo motorized.
Yep. And then the other thing is that if you're going to mount them to the walls, you just want to make sure that you find the beams. You're really trying to get to like hard infrastructure. Walls can vibrate a lot. One of the cool things that we've seen in a couple areas is they put them on tracks, and they then pin them into the beams, and the track covers like 20 feet. So you can program where the camera is, and it gives you a little bit of room to move. And it's not just that you're not doing moves with it. You're just getting the camera to another place. But when they're building up a space, they may have built something in the middle that you now have to get around. And if your camera's only in one place, it becomes a limiting factor. Go ahead, Sky, and then we'll move on.
And can you rig that so your lensing and all of that is capable on the track? I'm sorry, I've seen that in a large mega church in Atlanta, and they put that up on the balcony, in front of the balcony. So I think had this.
If you want to do the moves with a big camera and a long lens, you have to spend a lot of money to do it well. Like otherwise it turns into a toy because it's just shaking and doing all kinds of other stuff. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Bill. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Victor from the panel most days, he's not here today, says, Alex, have you mentioned that when shooting for vertical social media, you should shoot horizontally at 4K and then use a follow feature on Final Cut Pro 10? Can you tell us how this works?
I haven't used it yet. I just haven't had time. Final Cut came out while I was in shooting. so I haven't had time to play with it. I actually have a perfect project for it because I did one with my kids where I shot in that 4K or 6K, and then I did it by hand. So what I'm hoping to do is give it to Final Cut and see what Final Cut does versus what I did in that take. But essentially it just analyzes the image and it's looking for it's theoretically smartly framing it up. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's follow so much as it's intelligently framing shots in your thing, in whatever you feed it. Normally you take a Final Cut 10 project, duplicate it, reset it for vertical, and then it's going to immediately go into its analysis mode and try to figure out where there's content in the frames that looks like the main subject, and we'll try to frame the shots to match that.
It's an interesting thing for Apple to really focus on, but I think part of it has to do with the fact that Apple has been extremely successful in the social media market. When we deal with creators, and I've said this a bunch of times, but when we deal with creators, all the ones that aren't trying to find a job in Hollywood, that are just cutting for their own shows, they're all on Final Cut. Like literally, it's 100%. So it's just a really fascinating. So I think we'll probably see a lot more social media tools because it's a soft place for Apple to work. Next question.
Okay, moving along. Hasmukh, also of the panel, says, Sky says I'm out of sync. Another piece of skill to acquire. So video through HDMI into ATEM, audio on the MixPre. Let me have an overview of how to fix the sync.
Mickey, do you want to go ahead and talk Hasmukh?
Yeah, I'm learning every day, and that's all in office hours. How am I doing?
You're off by a lot. I'd say probably 6 or 8 frames.
Yeah, looks like 8 frames.
Yeah. So is the audio going directly through the MixPre it's not going through the ATEM, right?
Oh, it's going through the MixPre.
And so you would want to do a delay. Go ahead, Mickey. You want to talk about the delay in the MixPre?
So, yeah. because of your video chain now, the image is going from your phone through an adapter and then going to the ATEM. There's a lot of video processing that's going on there, especially if the frame rate that your iPhone is spitting out is different from the frame rate that your ATEM is set to. So right now, your audio signal is coming into your computer faster than the video signal is getting to your computer. So you'll need to line those up. Alex has mentioned a lot of times the Hitomi Matchbox. Is that correct?
Yep.
Matchbox? Yeah.
Yep.
Which is an industrial tool to measure sync. It gets you very accurate to the millisecond measurements of sync. But for our purpose, for your purpose, a simpler, a much more affordable solution to measuring your sync would be just to record your audio and video chains as they go through, get them recorded, put them in an NLE such as Final Cut Premiere, whatever you use, and just count how many frames. Say if you do a clap, how many frames the video is off from the audio, and dial that amount of frames or milliseconds into either a MixPre or a program like Audio Hijack or any other place where you can delay your audio.
And Mickey, are you delaying in the MixPre? Are you delaying the output or the input?
If I have to do it on a MixPre, I do it on the output because the input doesn't have nearly enough.
I think the input only has like 30 milliseconds, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
30,
really,
30 or 40.
I think it's really designed
it's more for
wireless.
designed to align different sources together, different microphones or different. If you have a wireless pack that has a significant delay, if you want to line up wired microphones to that wireless system, that's what the input delay is for. But the output is designed to work out the AV sync issues.
Right. Go ahead, Hasmukh, and then Sky, and then Rosco.
So I like cheap. So the option then is to delay it in the MixPre in the output. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. You can see it right there. That's
Yeah, that's Guy's camera.
There's Guy's, and there's the stereo out left delay. You can see the delay there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you'd want to, and you'd probably turn yours up to at least. I would say
that goes up to 400. I think.
I would go to 210 for you right now. 180 to 210 is probably what you want. I'd start there and see how close you are, and just make sure that both left and right are the same.
What he's spinning, Hasmukh, is the little dial on the side on the right. It's the little dial. Sorry, go back to Guy.
You mean
that little dial right there?
That little dial.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll figure that out.
Yeah, but that's how you sync it up.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.
Rosco?
Yeah, there's a lot of little devices. I don't know if I can get this held up properly, but there's a lot of little devices on YouTube that'll even help you with your sync. It'll actually, give you something visual and audio.
I'd be really careful of that. They're almost all off. So
but it'll get you in the ballpark. I mean,
it'll get you in the ballpark. Good. Most of them are off by 1 to 2 frames. And so what I do, I have one that I've jerry-rigged that I'm using right now because I haven't had time to build a new one, is I found a pretty good one. It says Twitch on it or whatever. So I took the Twitch off, but I downloaded it. It's 30 milliseconds off. So I downloaded it and then I took it into Final Cut and I fixed it. And then I exported it back out. Now I use that as a looping play out as a quick test. Again, in my copious free time, I'm going to build a better one. And then we're going to hopefully have the guys from Hitomi on to talk about sync in general in the not too distant future. Go ahead. I've been talking to them about some other stuff. Hasmukh?
So I assume if I go back to my Brio, which is directly into my computer, I have to reset that delay that I've set up in the MixPre.
That's correct. Go ahead, Lawrence. Your sync is perfect, which means you don't have your audio. Nope, still don't have your audio.
Your Zoom mute is on, Garrett.
Yeah. But that for everyone watching, if we just tell you your sync is perfect, it means we don't have audio. Mickey.
Yeah, to the point that Hasmukh just brought up, every single chain has a different amount of delay that you have to dial in. So the
And that's
every
the
little
secret of
thing
broad.
that
Yeah, everything you add to the
yeah
video chain, especially, right, Nikki?
yeah you know, you change a camera, different camera, that's a different delay that you have to dial in. If you change the frame rate your camera is on, that's a different delay you have to dial in. Like every single thing in the chain will affect it.
And we had for a while, for a lot of our equipment, we actually used the previous version of what the Matchbox is to measure the delay of every piece of equipment, so that we could roughly calculate. We could roughly calculate the delay across system. If I just look at a wiring diagram, I can just say the video is going through these things, and it wasn't always completely accurate, but it was within a frame. Of if you have nominal offsets for the switcher and the Teranex, but it depends. You change what the Teranex is doing, and then it takes more time. So you have to kind of think through that as well.
Hasmukh, I put that Twitch movie in Makana.
Next question.
Okay, we got about 5 left. Paul Wallace says, can Kev lead a discussion of the Google event and the new products, and puts a link in there.
Well, I think I might just concentrate on one, which is the one we were talking about, the new Google Chromecast, which is now has the new moniker with Google TV. So they've changed from Android to Google. £49, 3 color choices, support for Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision, DSX, HDR10 Plus, as well as for support for H.265 streams and 4K. And it's available in your stores now. As to quality, can't speak to that because obviously it's new, but looks good.
And I'm not sure whether we're discussing Paul, you're looking for the discussion of the products themselves or the event itself.
Whole range.
Oh, did we lose Paul? The event, I think the thing we talked about a little earlier was the fact that they're all looking off screen all the time, which we don't understand.
No.
Like it's an interesting take on it. None of us, it doesn't make really any sense to any of us. I'm sure it did to somebody because they spent a lot of money on it. So
Isn't that the style you see on things like 60 Minutes?
it is, but this isn't 60 Minutes. Those are interviews, and even then, if I was 60 Minutes, I would absolutely do an Interatron. Like that would be way more interesting, in my opinion. But they have a way that they do it. So, I mean, I feel like the only reason you do this style anymore is because you don't have the infrastructure to do it well.
My suspicion on those is that in 60 Minutes, they want the interviewer to be as important as the interviewee. Yep. That's branding for them.
Sure.
Also, Masterclass uses that style, but it's only for a certain part of the story. So you'll see them offset, where the person's reflecting. Usually, they'll go to the side.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm just loving the insights because of the different perspectives, because somewhere somebody was taught a thing that you always do it this way. And I heard Kevin's passion, and I'm thinking, well, is it just because he's an old guy from an old system? No, there's a rule for a reason, and I want to know the reason. So this is awesome.
As do I.
I just think it's if you look at where YouTubers are going, if you look at TikTok, everything is about eye contact. Everything is about eye contact. And so the thing is that the off camera, and I think that's one of the things that shows up for us, is the off camera feels so off because everything we're watching in modern online video is all eye contact. And you look at everyone with more than 10 million views on 10 million followers on TikTok, and almost all of them are amazing at looking at the camera.
I always see the ignorance, though, as we just talked about a few days ago, when the color wasn't right because they didn't know how to put a LUT on.
I know, but
a jump cut was because they didn't know how to. They wanted to take the ums and the uhs out. So
sure, but what's happening though is that the culture. I mean, this will be seen as, I believe that the off-camera thing will be seen as a very old-fashioned production technique within 5 years. Like it's just so. It is barreling down down where we're just seeing so much of that content, and it's not something like the I don't know how to use log was something that was a short little fad until people actually understood how to color it. This is not. This is like something that we've seen happening for the last decade, on YouTube and now on TikTok. Go ahead, Stuart. Good.
For that contact to the viewer, when teaching someone to present a camera, do you teach them to look right focused on the lens, or do you tell them to focus on a point about 6 feet behind for the distance people would normally be away from their TVs?
I have them look straight at the lens. And usually I give them a teleprompter, because usually what I want is I have teleprompters, a lot of them, and so I want people to look at somebody else right in front of the lens. That's the thing, is that it's a different view when you see somebody else on the other side. Your eyes converge differently, your face does different things. So you don't want them. It's really hard to look I've been on a couple TV networks, and when they do, it's just a dead camera and I'm looking straight at a lens and I'm listening to them, like if you're watching CNN or whatever, I'm listening and I'm just talking to a camera. I don't see them at all, and it's a weird experience. And so the thing is that if the problem is, in real life, when someone looks like this all the time, when they're looking over your head all the time, we call that Asperger's. So the thing is that it means that they're not able to interact with people effectively. And so the thing is that when someone's looking off all the time like this and doing all this stuff, that's an avoidance system that people use so they don't have to be with you. And so in real life, that's what it looks like. And so that's why I don't think this is a fad. I think that this is we're getting good at doing this and talking straight into the camera. And so as a result, we're going to keep on getting better at it. The reason we didn't do it before is because we didn't have the tools. It's not because it was a good design idea. The reason that we have 2398 is because someone in the 20s was cheap. The whole 24 frame a second thing is all because people didn't want to spend more on film. And so we have to stay away from arbitrary limitations that we add to our production based on something that doesn't exist anymore. And that's a lot of our production processes are like that. Next question.
All right, we're moving on to Mike Henderson in Colorado, who asks, when live switching, how do you decide on what shots get jump cuts and what shots mix? Any rules of thumb? Oh, boy.
I'm assuming you mean cut versus dissolve. So I think that's what you're. I think it's. I think that I just want to define it. That's my assumption, is cut versus dissolve. Go ahead, Kev, and then Mickey, and then Sky.
Well, it literally depends on the program you're making. If it's a hard news interview, you're two heads and they're just talking to each other, cut's fine. But if I'm interviewing a painter who's going to start a picture and at the end we intend to see the thing finished, then I'm going to do an interview, and then I may do a dissolve to give the cue to the viewer that time's passed and suddenly we've seen a finished photograph or picture.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Sky.
Yeah, definitely it varies from situation to situation, but ideally you would like to have at least a 30-degree difference in the angle between the cameras, between the shots, for it to not feel like a jump cut. And occasionally I also find that cutting between two wide shots with neither of them having movement also feels like a jump cut.
And you can go from a wider shot to a closer shot too. You can emphasize something by bumping it in. But I think we're talking about, I think it's cuts versus dissolves. I use dissolves very sparingly, and part of that comes from because I stream. Dissolves are a disaster for compression. Yes. So we, I tend to think about, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it relatively quickly, because if you change your image very slowly, you tend to break up. And so I tend to be very sensitive to it from a technical perspective of not using dissolves very often. But when we do concerts, we do it all the time. Like when we do, if we're streaming a concert, we'll blend, we'll dissolve from the singer to the guitar player to the, because you're trying to kind of create that feeling. Go ahead, Sky, and then Bill, and then we'll move on, because we're going to try to get these questions done.
I have used if you can't solve it, dissolve it, because it was a way, it's an energy. Think of what the energy that you're moving the story forward, and what is the energy of a hard cut versus a long, soft bridge of transition from one thing to the next. So it's a musical, it's a visual analogy for a musical transition.
Go ahead.
So no less a pundit than the editing guru Walter Murch talks a lot about the fact that there is a part of it that is deciding to cut and where to cut, but there's another part of it that's about feeling. And I remember reading him say that he does a cut 3 times by feel, and only when he makes exactly the same cut 3 times by feel does he feel that he has the actual cut right. So people who edit for a living are very precise about how and why, and it is both technical and artistic always.
Next question. Oh, go ahead, Kev, real quick. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, following on from what Bill was saying, that it is very important that you classify the style of your program's cutting before you even go in. You've got to establish that. You can't go in before and then change halfway through, because it'll never work in your edit. And you need to feel a scene. Sometimes it can be just the length of pause, which can change the whole meaning of a scene. So there's no set length. You feel the dialogue, the setup, and you get that sense, whatever it is you're going for, an emotional beat or an action beat.
Next question. Oh, you're not making it. Yep, try it again. There you go.
Oh, okay. Ed Willock, follow up on my Zoom metrics question. Are you able to measure your Mukana listening viewing audience? I sometimes only listen on Mukana when I'm working, like today. Okay.
We're working on that. We can't measure that yet. I mean, I can see how many people are in, and theoretically we'd have the data. I just don't. I don't always look at it, and I just broke it somehow. I was looking over at it. There we go. Yeah. So I mean, we know how many people are there, and we haven't started tracking it with data, but it's something that we're thinking about definitely. Next question.
Okay, that one's answered, and we're moving on to Steve Della Pietra. What is your recommended workflow for streaming an event in multiple languages? And he's got 6+ languages he's dealing with.
So it's probably an extra hour, but I'll answer it in a minute, and then I'm just going to answer it really fast, and then we'll come back to it, because I think multi-language is probably a great hour to talk about it. Basically, you need to have your you need your interpreters, and a lot of the stuff I do, all the interpreters are on site, so we're giving them high quality mics. Interpreters like to be able to mute themselves, so giving them a mute button or something like that. There are interpreter stations. The circuitry in the interpreter stations is not very good, so you end up with a lot of noise and clicks and all kinds of things and closures, and it doesn't sound good. So we like to, I mean, in a perfect world, we like to have, a lot of times you have them all in one place. And so you have to use something that's got a lot of off-axis rejection. So, I mean, even putting people up in front of SM58s will sound much better than anything most people hear with interpretation. That goes into your mixer, and you're paying attention to all the levels and all the controls. Then basically what you're doing is re-embedding all of the languages back into the SDI signal. You can put up to 16 on that SDI signal. Typically, you only do 15, because the first 2 channels will be left and right of your main language, and then the rest of them are all mono. Then you put those into your encoder, and then you have the encoder grab the languages that it needs. So and some apps do that well, and some apps don't. Obviously, I'm mostly familiar with elementals. One thing we're excited about is the links will now do 8 languages per link. Unfortunately, they only grab the last 8, so you have to do 2 embeds if you want to get 16 languages, more than 8 languages out. But you could do the 6 that you were talking about that way. So, but then you get them into either into the AWS, or you get them into your encoder. The encoder then has an event where it's looking for the right channels of audio coming in to grab onto it, and then you're going to stream that out to your CDN of choice. Some CDNs will let you, really, if you build your own HLS or whatever, you can set it up so that you can change the audio channels without changing the video. But most of the CDNs, you have to build a new, if you're using something like Ustream or Livestream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you'll have to create different streams for each one of those. And a lot of times it's easier to do that in the cloud, because you have tons of bandwidth in the cloud and not at home. You don't want 6 or 8 streams from one place, means that you need 60 to 80 megs a second to do that. Or you can send one up with the audio and split it up in the cloud. So that's one of the few places that the cloud starts to make sense, unless you have a lot of bandwidth. Okay, that's my really quick answer, and then we can probably talk through that someday in another one. Go ahead, Mickey, really quickly.
Yeah, just a question on that setup, Alex. I guess you aren't encoding the individual streams yourself on your end.
No, we do. So you can, I will encode. You can encode them on your end, or you can put it in the cloud and then encode them out to the individual CDN, individual events that you need to do. Most of the stuff I've done in the past, if we had enough bandwidth, we just did it with an elemental. And the thing that the elementals get caught up in, or any encoder, is really the scaling. So if you keep the same video frame and you're simply the encoding part isn't as CPU intensive. So you can have one elemental, for instance, stream all 8 languages out. It'll grab them all. And it won't run over power, even a small one. I don't know how to do it with other encoders because that's all I've had to use for a decade. So I don't, but other encodes should be able to just grab onto those. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, because I've never done anything like this, but I in my head I would think that like I would make 6 separate mixes on the board with
it. Yeah, so it depends on how you're going to do it. Whether you're going to have so a lot of times what you're doing is you have to decide how you're going to do the ducking. Yeah, so I didn't talk about that, but there is ducking for the language. There is behind the main, and then there is cross language. And those are the 3 main ones we do. So the ducking is someone's talking, you hear them start, and then it ducks in, and you give it a slow attack. If you're going to do it with that many, you can't mix it yourself, right? So you give it a slow attack, so you hear the front end of that word, and then you start to hear the translation over top of it, and then it comes back out again as they stop to talk. And that can be done, I mean, even with a Dugan in the right setting, to kind of, to mix those together. Then the hardest one is when 2 people are talking. We had one with an English speaker, an Indian speaker, and we wanted one feed that went both directions. So what we did is you have to set it up so that you hear the English softly in the background when the Indian person is talking, and you hear the Indian softly in the background when the English, so you have to, and building that mix was more complex. But we wanted to have one version where you could do that. And then we actually, in that case, created 3 versions. So we created an English, an Indian, and a mix. And so then broadcasters could decide which one they wanted to use, which one they were the most comfortable with. And so anyway, there's a lot to it, like everything else. There's a lot of ways you can slice that up. It's probably a good second hour. If someone puts it in the second hour, we'll remember. I want to finish the questions. Let's kind of go speed round, and then we'll jump into the sound devices stuff. Go ahead. Next question.
Cool. Michael Weber says, looking for graphic software to support high school sports production. Any recommendations? Looking at New Blue Titler Live Force Sports Switcher. Is Blackmagic ATEM all SDI inputs?
Yeah, the ATEMs, the larger ATEMs are all SDI inputs. The 2 that I would look at is the New Blue, and then the other one, if you're on a Mac, is Softron. Has their own on-air graphics, which I believe can tie into sports systems. Depends on what but you do have to look at the compatibility of your scoreboard with the output, because you want to make sure that whatever graphics tool you get can read the metadata from either, like if you're doing, as Stuart can probably talk to, if you're doing a race, there's metadata that's being delivered back to you. You want to make sure you can read it. The second thing is that if you're doing a game, there's data on that scoreboard, and you want to make sure you can read that too. Or what you got to decide what sports and what data you're getting, and making sure that you can pull those streams. Since that takes a little bit of talking to the folks that are related to it to know what format they're doing, and then what format needs to come in to make that work. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Stuart Fairweather, talking about compression and cutting. Is there any mixer, hardware or software, for streaming use that will delay a cut to the next keyframe in the output codec?
No. Well, that would be painful, I think. I think that would be, because what the encoder does is it just adds a keyframe, where it adds a keyframe if it sees something change. So when you cut it, it's trying to add them, but if there's a huge scene change, that's part of what the encoder is doing, is it goes, I see a big scene change, I'm going to cut. What gets you in dissolves is that it's not enough pixels are changing for it to realize that something changed, and it's still using the old P frames. Like so the P and B frames, and so it's not laying down another I-frame to take care of that, and so you sneak up, basically a dissolve kind of sneaks up on the encoder, and then the encoder's like whoa, and then it puts a new an I-frame in. But that's why you see this trailing and stuff like that when you do it. Go ahead, Stuart.
What I was thinking is if somebody's really bandwidth limited, if it paused until the next break, it wouldn't disturb the group of frames. It would create a new keyframe at the right point, and it would be a smooth, just for real tight bandwidth limits.
That'd be really tight. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it.
There'd be editors screaming to get that piece of shit thrown out.
Oh, hey, language. All right. Next question.
We actually have two from Sky, and they're related. For those that added on an iPad, would you use an Apple Pen or your fingers? And can you add additional monitors, hardline or wireless?
You can definitely. I don't know about monitors. I think you can. I don't know. I think all you can do is mirror.
I think my J5 is a bridge, J5 Create bridge thing I'm using. Will be able to HDMI out to some additional monitors.
From an iPad?
They say it will.
I think you can monitor. I think you can get a separate monitor or a mirrored. Like I think you can mirror the iPad definitely with either AirPlay or with an HD or the USB-C to HDMI or whatever. But I don't think you can get a separate view from an iPad to another one. So if you want to mirror it, I think you can. Go ahead, Nikki.
I don't think Sidecar works.
Yeah, some apps allow you to give you a totally separate display coming out of
from the iPad.
Yeah, so say what's that picture editing program? Luma Forge?
Well, Luma
Fusion.
Luma Fusion.
Luma Touch. Okay.
Yeah, it will give you like a display output of just the picture preview.
Okay.
Well, I had coffee with Terry last week, and we're partnering, and I'm going to be working with her, and so we'll be learning a lot about that product.
That's great. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, a lot of apps, especially video apps, they'll do the breakout on the second screen. But as for a pencil, I like to use these $12. I think this is Makus. You can get on Amazon. That way, if I lose the device, I have like another one, and I can buy more on a whim. And these work really well.
Huge, because I thought I was going to have to spend $90 on an Apple version, and I just thank you. I'm a stylus guy because I've had Wacoms since like forever.
Yeah, and this is the dual one. So it's got the big fat one on the other end, and then the small fine tip on.
Can you
with a clear? Yeah, I'll put a link at the show notes.
Thank you.
So I am now
jumping
to the. Okay. Let's see. Go ahead, Lawrence.
I'm checking in if you can hear me now. Is everybody here?
Yes,
this was very weird. Just quickly, I don't want to interrupt the show, but this is the second time this happened. First time yesterday, my loop deck audio hijack chain somehow stopped feeding into Zoom, and I haven't touched anything. It happened, it was all fine this morning. So the only workaround was quitting and restarting Zoom. So I'm a little worried about this. Not sure what happened, but it seems I'm back now.
Yeah, they're the gremlins. They visited me on my audio chain, and I had some bad connections between TA4F, and it was causing noise.
Anyway, sorry about that.
Fix things.
Mickey, can you make me attendee, please?
Sure thing.
Thank you. Have a great show, guys.
Thanks, Lawrence. So we're going to jump into this. It looks interesting. Hold on, let me. I don't have a great way to do this, so I'm just going to do a screen share with. Let's see here.
I have it set up if you need it.
Yeah,
back
we'll
up.
have you do it.
Okay. So let me call it up here. Bring it up and get that, and tell me if you can hear it.
The UHF TV.
Yes, we can.
where the lower end of the UHF TV band in the United States is 470 megahertz.
Tell me if it needs to be up or down.
So that's roughly 250.
That's good because we can talk over it right now.
Yeah.
So if you have comments, just throw them out there. You guys can talk about it on the in the chat. You can ask questions in the chat related to this if it pops up.
Half wave or quarter wave antennas for these different wireless
We can
devices.
talk about either.
I see they're just screen scraping the Zoom whole interface of Zoom there.
Based on this sort of simple math of the size of that wavelength. And antenna tuning becomes important. And so you'll know with a lot of your gear that you'll need different size
mic
antennas for different frequencies.
In front of his mouth. We can hear the plosives.
Here's this giant chart that the Department of
hear all that breathing.
Put out every 4
That's
years
why
to
you put the
show.
mic
So
on
that
to the
shows
side of
us
your mouth,
all of the
especially in a
different
sound summit.
frequency allocations
Mouth
in the US.
mic should go on the
This is really
side.
just meant to drive home the point that there's a ton of different users of wireless
But
frequencies.
he is using his window as his light source.
Starts down in the real low kilohertz.
He's got his
range, it
laptop
goes
up against a
300 gigahertz.
window in his dining
And
room.
I'm just highlighting a couple of these areas. We're zooming in here on our core TV bands.
Hard part here is you can't really read
You
it.
got a low VHF.
Maybe you
high
can on the
VHF,
original,
and
but
a UHF TV band.
at least what we're watching here.
As you look in here,
Not
where it'll
too
say
much better.
broadcasting television,
His
that's
vocal
still a very small part
intelligibility
of
is
this
very good.
overall spectrum that we're fitting in with. So what's some common
There
spectrum
was
for
one of these done
wireless
by
devices?
High Vision regarding
Again, I'm based in the United States, so this is going to
NASCAR
be US
camera gear and the like.
spectrum. But
They
this is
started off by
somewhat
having
common,
theme music from a game
across
show
other
playing
countries.
and quizzes.
Anyway, we're
And
giving
it
you
was
an
very much like
overview
amateur
of
hour in comparison to what we normally
your low VHF,
getting used
Right.
to.
and then
Yeah.
your high VHF.
Alex, what's your
UHF
thought
TV is
about
what we're gonna
that
talk
format
about
for
the
text? I mean,
most,
it's just a big dense blob of text, but can you
470
think
to
of any
608.
better way to display that?
But then there's
Something
some
like that.
changes that have been happening.
Sound
in
like
600
this.
megahertz band.
I
Where there's still a couple of slivers of that are.
I think what I would probably
allowed
do is
to operate wireless devices.
I would
in.
add these slowly graphically,
So
or
if
something
you
across it. Like I
example
would
of what's
I wouldn't
left
put
for
all of it
600
up at
meg.
one time. Anytime you put
And
all this
because a
text
lot
up,
of
people
600
stop
meg in the
listening
United
to you.
States
They're
is now
reading all the other
measured
stuff and
for
they're
other
not processing
uses.
it. So I would
You'll
say
see
I would have
people
had 54 to 72,
about
like have those two
alternate frequency
pop
bands where
up,
maybe you didn't
like boom,
before.
boom, boom. As I'm
So
talking, you
there
just keep on having
is
the slide
unlicensed
build itself
ISM band.
rather
There's
than
number
it's a
of
harder
ISM
way to
bands,
do a
but the 902 to
presentation, but it's a
928,
lot
a
more
of people
effective
call
as
the
far as
900 meg ISM
keeping
band.
people
Is more
focused on what
common
you're
now.
talking about
Some
at that
devices
moment.
in there. We've got
Yeah, actually, now
expanded
that you
use of
mention it, I'm
the
seeing
studio
kind of
transmitter
natural
link,
groupings of
STL
VHF
and
TV
microwave
stuff
band.
in the first three, and then
That
we're moving it. Well, we've
is
got
now
UHF below
941.5
that.
to 960
So there are some
with a couple of
groupings that you
stops
could
in
look at.
service there for other
Wouldn't you want a
devices.
second operator though to do
Like to
the
highlight that
animations
that
to make sure they're
frequency
timed up
range
right,
is
or just a lot of
about
practice for the
It's a,
host?
I usually
licensed use
I
over
practice
this
mine a lot.
but
If I'm going to do that, do
74
something like that
licensing.
while I'm talking, I'm going to
little
go
bit.
through it a bunch of times, especially with the
Abstract
slide
band is
deck. I'm going to go
something
through it a
that
bunch of times. But
has
even
now been
like if you look
opened
at
up
post-production
for
world, when I did a little thing on
more
motion,
broad use
by the time I
wireless
got to
devices. I think in
post-production
the
world, I
coming
had
years,
done
you'll
that
probably see more
that
wireless
demo
audio devices
60
there,
times.
microphones and such.
like I had just done it
Decades
over and over and
audio
over
has
again,
become
trying to
more common for
carve out things, and that's
wireless
the
intercom
demos are much
systems.
harder than keynotes
And there's
because
some microphones that
you have to
operate
get all the
there
steps
as well
right,
from
and you're trying to not to
looks like
get
an
people
Assured
lost, but you're also trying to
band
cover all the
microphone
bits and
system.
pieces. And then I had to show it to some
And
folks
there's
to
some
review it,
devices
and then
that
I did
operate
it
up to
again,
2.4 gig,
and
which
so
you'll
it's
see commonly used for
so you
Wi-Fi, but
practice is, the thing is
other
do
devices
really
that
good
operate there with
presentations takes
wireless intercom
practice.
systems,
If we were,
wireless microphone
but
systems,
those of us who are
which
actors
2.4 gig
understand
ISM
or have
bands
been
as well.
actors in the past, understand the need for a lot of
I wanted to
practice.
just talk a
There's
little bit, and I
rehearsals
think
and there's
most
practice
folks
and
in the
there's
US are aware of
memorization and
this
there's
now,
process.
Remember the lines, love.
The
Yeah, and on
area
that last
above
slide, he was having to direct people's
616
eyes with his
megahertz
actual
up to
little cursor
698
rather than
That's-
has
highlighting.
been auctioned
I
off.
guess where my little
T-Mobile is a
telestrator,
big winner of that
comes in
auction.
handy. Or if
So
anybody has a
there's cellular
telestrator, being able to circle
services that
things
are
and draw on it
operating in
really
these various
adds a
up and
lot to
downlink bands.
the
So this
value of
gives
the
you a good
experience.
visual
As a plus, he at
of
least
what's
zoomed
happening
in on
there.
exactly
As we
the
talk
thing
about
he
the
was
areas
using.
I don't think he's
that
doing
are
that. I
now
think that's on the
operating
the sound devices
devices.
side. I mean, that's where they're.
I'm doing that. I'm
you're
actually
doing
doing
that.
that.
You're doing the
Sliver of
Zoom?
2 megahertz. That's just above TV 37.
Well, they need to take lessons
Yes.
from you.
We
then.
start into
Yes,
They
it-
should be taking lessons from
This-
you.
This is
You're
what
doing
it
much
looks
better
like like right now.
Yeah, they're just doing it that way.
Correct.
So our
I'm
feed
watching-
is better
I'm-
than their feed.
I'm watching it on a second channel.
Well
and
played,
he's-
Jeffrey.
It's available for
Well played.
wireless devices.
You've added the value they're
So
not.
that is reserved for licensed systems. And when we
Yeah,
say
for this,
licensed
I would have
systems,
gone
for
with the
US
picture-in-picture
operations, we're
instead
talking
of the
about a Part 74
side-by-side mode,
license.
which they have full
Yeah,
control
Or
of
6
within
meg of
Zoom.
that
Right.
is available for.
Yeah, I'm watching it on a second monitor over here, and yeah, it's on YouTube, it's
But
side
he
by
might have
side.
to redesign all his slides if he goes picture in
Who
picture.
else is operating in the area that
So
I'm
basically,
operating
our
in
experience
my
with
wireless
Jeffrey doing
devices
that Zoom is actually
T-band
better than the
radio.
people watching
These
directly.
are commonly public safety, like two-way radios. Could
He's
also
doing what
be
you need to do as a
two-way
director,
radios
which is
that have a
focus the
special
audience on what they
temporary
need to look at
authorization.
when they need to look
But,
at it.
they're two-way radios that can
Speaking
be
of
high
focusing,
power.
I've done
is
this
there
before.
a
2-watt transmit.
Jeffrey, you're doing that again, aren't you?
Some of the
Anytime I
base
see the
stations can be 10 watts. to
Speaking of
100 watts.
focusing,
There's
is there
repeaters set
a
up in there,
way
so
of
they're pretty high power compared to what we're
what's the
doing
easiest way
with
to-
wireless
having
microphones.
like a light
And it
blob
varies by
that
market.
moves
I've got a
around the
list of
screen
the major cities in the
and
US that
fading the rest just
use
slightly,
T-band
maybe a spot
public
darker,
safety radio,
to concentrate where the
and what
viewer is
specific
to the
TV
dialogue
channels
that
they're
the
operating on.
Yeah,
presenter is
presentation
One thing to think about
programs
with this is that
often have that.
T-band radios can be intermittent, right? It's a two-way radio,
Yeah,
so it's
I like
only
it.
transmitting when
Well, there are some
somebody's
that
actually keyed up.
actually do that around a
radio.
mouse. You know, the
Yeah.
mouse actually
So
becomes
you
this
just wanna make
glowing
sure
orb.
as you're
And
I mean,
putting together a
but it's
one
not
of
a
the things
shape.
that really
you're
works
going
if
to a
you're
new
not doing it
site,
from your computer, if you're doing it from like your
that you've
iPad
got
and you're pumping
those
it
TV
in,
channels just
the iPad
blocked
has
off
a
in your
curse,
coordination.
you can draw on it, which is really useful.
Which kind of leads us into the idea of
ScreenFlow has a
RF
lot
band
of
planning. Like
those
if I'm
tools built in.
It does,
deploy
but
a set
not
of
for live.
wireless mics for an event, where can I
Well, again,
place
all
them?
things are
Where can
possible
they
with time and
go
money.
in
And
with
yeah,
all of the other
Jeffrey's done
devices
this
that I've
as a
got set
presenter
up?
before, but
So
this guy's an engineer.
here's a
He's
scan
talking
from a
about
spectrum
numbers. He
analyzer,
may not have this
and
ability.
If you've seen
He
one of
does
these
sound
before,
like
you
an
kind of
engineer.
know
I
the
mean,
telltale
Again, I think though that
signs,
if you look at
television,
for
and
all of these
some
companies,
constant transmit devices
the thing is
are
that
shown
what
in
they're
the
not
scan.
doing is taking their
And so if I know
event
where
budget
these
and
television
applying it
stations
to
are, I know I need to avoid them,
their
or
online budget.
put everything
You know,
else.
like
Well,
that's what the ones
a
that
lot
are
of
going to
times
be
it's a
that are doing
good
this.
idea if you
The
can
ones
to
that are really
group your
turning out
microphones
well, that people are
together,
doing well, is
your
they took
IFBs
their booth
together,
budget,
your intercoms,
which
give them each
oftentimes
their
is
own
somewhere between
separate
50
slices of spectrum for
$50,000
you
and $5 million,
to operate in. And so this is
and they're
just sort of a
applying it to
sample
doing
RF
something
band plan.
virtually,
If
and
I was
then
setting up a
that
large
turns
event at this
into a great
location,
experience.
where might I want
When you
place
just
these
go, okay,
different
well now we're
devices
online and we're just going to use
and
a
how I
PowerPoint.
separate them from each other
That's
and
not,
avoid any local
you know,
interference.
the same.
Well, last Friday at the
Talk a little
education,
bit before
when
about,
Chris talked about we are
FCC
in the
rules,
era of the
FCC,
automobile
Federal
versus the
Communications
horse.
Commission, the folks that
And
govern use
this
of
is
wireless
that
devices in the
transitional
US.
period. And that's
So
why I keep asking
Part
Kev
15
about
devices are your
what is
licensed
tradition
devices. They're
that we
allowed
need to follow
operate in a
and
number
what
of
are
different areas
facts
for the
of
purposes our
storytelling that
discussion. UHF-TV band.
get to the core of the
Any
audience.
device
So,
operating under Part
and Bill's
15
Bill's
rules,
point,
you
see
can
inside.
But I don't know about
200
you, but like when I see
or
this
sorry,
much text, I'm like, I
50
kind of
milliwatts.
glaze over a
So
little bit.
I know a lot of you guys are using
I started
devices that
talking, I
operate
told, yeah,
beyond
whatever.
50 milliwatts. up
That's
to maybe
because there's nothing
250
to watch on
milliwatts.
screen. We're
Right.
losing
So
our
if you want to
interest on
operate
it.
above 50
It's just a
milliwatts
voice
in
and
the
a
UHF
wall
TV
of
band,
text.
then
I
you
mean,
need to
a lot of my
74
slides change every
license.
couple seconds.
That's
And while
what
I'm
we need.
talking,
You get from
they're
the
going with what
FCC,
I'm talking
engages
about,
you
and they're
a lot of
disappears,
advantages,
disappears,
including
disappears,
being able
disappears,
to
disappears.
operate
As I'm
just
talking, it's
higher
all coming
transmit
out.
power.
I don't want anything that I'm not
We
talking
talked a
that I
little bit
haven't
before,
spoke
was
to.
listed in our
I don't want anything to be
overview about
there
what your
until I
maximum
say it.
transmit powers are
Then
on
the
some
other
of
thing
these
is that when
alternate
I'm,
bands that we're able to
as soon as I
operate
get done
now,
with that
like
overall
the
thought, I
guard
want to
band
get that out of the
duplex
way.
gap.
You know, like,
Is
you know,
mainly 20
and
milliwatt
you know, that's the
maximum.
part
You're gonna
that
see a lot of the newer
Ouch.
digital devices being
That
limited
was
to
that was
20 milliwatts
Jeffrey.
in that.
Oh, that
Yeah,
was
that's
Jeffrey.
because of
That
those
was
Yeah, that's
rules.
Jeffrey doing that. No, no.
Big
resolution.
deal about a Part 74
Well, you want
license is it
Switch.
does allow you
Thanks,
to
Jeff,
operate
because you're making a far
indoors on
better
a TV
job of this
channel
than they are.
as long as that TV
So are we
channel is
going to
below
critique Jeffrey? Or we, no.
-84 dBm
Well,
on
no,
your
critique
spectrum.
It's
everything.
presentation.
Something that I've
What are
seen
you
a lot.
consuming?
What Jeffrey's showing here, though, is
Where
that it's important
if
is
we're
this gets
trying
into
to
that
put
whole,
in
the problem with
shared
the
wireless
picture-in-picture and
frequencies, we're
side-by-side is
operating
while
on
it's
top of
easier,
DTV if we're
when someone's
indoors.
not talking to something on
Essentially,
the
that
slide,
DTV
we should see
channel
full
is such a
screen
low
of them.
level
Like that we
within the
switch to
facility that
them,
we're able
you know,
to put
because the
a
switching
wireless microphone or
experience
other wireless
is
device voice on that
is a violent action, right? And so it keeps you awake because you don't see that anywhere else in life unless we're sick. Really
think of what of a miss.
Where we're seeing huge changes in view.
Well, and the other thing is people are not watching on TVs anymore, so they're going to go searching on the internet for stuff they're interested in.
Folks like
You know,
Microsoft,
you have to keep their attention or they're going to be gone.
excited about using this white space spectrum.
So that's
for
high
stuff like
high
rural
numbered
broadband.
cable
So
broadcast.
the thing
Just
that, you know,
edit
your
every
wireless
3
geek
seconds
can be
because
keeping an eye on
you
what's
might
happening
not get
with
their
high-speed
attention otherwise.
devices and just
So
trying to make
Bill
sure that
Davis,
we've
to your
still got some
point, we are in a
protection from those
visual
devices
kitchen
if
right
they do
now,
start to see
and as you
more
just
widespread
said,
use.
here, taste this. Here, what does that taste like to you? And so we're all bringing our opinions and our taste buds, visual taste buds.
Plus,
at least it's just a corporate video. They're using it for
I think
video
where
for their source.
Jeffrey has it mixed now,
You're
this
kind of
is
still
small
operating
window,
in
right,
the gaps
big
between
content, which
their
is where most
transmissions.
people go as the
And it's
default.
helpful to think
I'm
about
still
that
getting
as you're
that bottom right
visualizing where am
logo
I
cut off
operating
a
my
little
wireless
bit, so I
devices,
don't know whether
when you
there's
think
something
who else
about
is
what
there,
you're doing.
you're
Okay, so
trying to
there's the
avoid
full
sometimes,
presentation they're giving us.
100 kilowatt
It's
TV
just
station or
static. I mean, I
100
can't
watt
really see
repeater
him.
radio.
I mean, that
That's
helps to
definitely
have
gonna
him
win
to
if you
look
try
at,
to
but
fight
I'm
them with
already
your
really tired of the
250
text.
milliwatt radio.
I mean, a fast reader will read that real quickly, and now I got another big thing to pull my
Skip
attention.
through this pretty quickly, but a lot of people are like, what do you talk about part
It's
74?
just
What does this
too
even
long.
mean?
I just posted the YouTube link in the Makana,
in the
so
US, we've got the Code of
if
Federal
you've got a second
Regulations.
monitor, you can.
Chapter I is the Federal Communications Commission.
I
and
just
they've got
scan
all
something
these
that has that
different
much
rules.
text, look for something I'm
Chapter
interested
C is
in, and
broadcast
then
radio
say, oh, I can
services,
go
and
look
then
that
gets
up.
us down to part 74.
Or
Guy,
have to
you
sit
don't
here.
like what I'm doing?
Covering our auxiliary and other program distribution
No,
services.
I love the
So
fact that
low-power
you're
auxiliary
making it
stations
better.
are really what we're talking about.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah, Jeff, you're doing a great job.
Part 74H.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
with that little
seconding on
cursor that
that,
he's
well
using
A
done.
lot of the folks
to
watching
push
this
us
today
to
are gonna
the content
know
he's
that they're
talking about, that
eligible
would
to
that
get a
even
Part
show
74
up on a
license, because a lot
phone
of you
in
folks
that
are
dual
involved
view
in
mode? Could you even
motion picture
Can you
production.
imagine reading that
By the way,
on a small
Chad
feed?
Lafarge,
you're
Lafarge
owner
said
of a
that
sound company
he does
that
point out that
operates a
Memo
lot of
or
wireless
that Boinks
channels. In
makes
this case, we're
a
talking
thing
about
to do that
routinely
cursor
50
thing that you
or
were talking about
more
live, and Oliver
wireless
should
channels.
past. So you could darken the screen and have something pointing to something that would be
Why should you get
part
it?
of the production.
As we talked
Yeah, I
about
think that
Live?
should be a
before,
best
you can
practices.
transmit
Yeah.
higher power levels.
Wow.
Yeah, live.
You can
That's huge.
Yeah.
use equipment that is.
Well, I
I'm
think
so
it's
wanting
a-
to do all my
74 rather
productions
than
live
that's
moving
certified
forward.
for
I'm so tired of
Part 15
post-production
operation.
now.
Plus, you've
think
got
there's
white background, black,
additional bands
small
that other people
text,
don't have
which means that
access
if you're
to, so
outside
there's
in
a
the
lot of-
sunlight trying to
lot of
pick that
advantages if
out,
you're
even
doing
on a decent display like
a
an iPhone or an Android phone,
more
it's going to
complicated
get
production where you
tiring
need to use
to
more
just keep
spectrum,
looking at that big
or you need
white.
just longer
Let's
range.
be honest, they're just replacing their virtual
Definitely
conference.
encourage
and
folks
putting it
to
on
Utterly
video.
correct,
They've not
Kev.
licensing
bothered
and
to
think
think
about
about
these
anything
FCC
further
rules.
than
I know
that.
it's kind of
I
it's a
just
little bit
got
dry
done
thinking
doing
about all the rules that
25
govern where we can operate these
videos doing this
devices,
exact
but
same
it's
thing,
important
except
to
I
kind of
made
be a
it
good
so
RF
it didn't
citizen
look
and
like it was
know
a Zoom
where
room.
we can operate. And really, ultimately, the more you know about the RF spectrum,
No,
the
Jeffrey, what you're doing
more
is
lively you can get your
fantastic.
system to
I
operate.
just,
And that's, I think, good
I'm
for
trying to
everybody involved with this.
ingest
That
the
document there
experience
should
here.
be broken into two segments straight away. The
Real
graphs and the
briefly,
words,
frequency
just to split
coordination. A
them.
lot of people use software
But you're
to
you're putting band-aids on
coordinate
it,
the
not
wireless
fixing
frequencies
it.
that they're setting up their events.
I'm
This gives
polishing
you
a
brief
finish
overview
the
of
word.
What are we talking about?
More-
We're saying about frequency coordination.
We need more
and
3D. That's what we
intermodulation.
need, and
Richard
we're gonna
III.
we're gonna do it in post. 3D in post.
Why do
not
I
a
care
good,
about intermodulation? Well, if I have more than one transmitter,
I wonder if
I'm
this
gonna
is in
have
part
the
because this
potential
is
to
highly
create
technical
intermod
stuff, and
products,
he's
this shows
expecting
you
the audience to be mostly
how
people who
two
have been reading these
transmitters
kind of white papers and
here,
engineering
if you
documents.
are
It is. I mean,
Congratulations.
you know, the thing is
together,
that it's
you can
technical
get
and
some
people,
mixing
you know,
of the
I don't know if I
two
would,
signals, and you can
I
get
will
these
admit that this is
intermod
probably not
products,
the
which
one I
are
would lead with.
essentially
You know, like
weaker
if I was doing
signals,
a
but
conference,
they exist, and so
this
this
is
could
the
be seen as interference to another
This
microphone.
is
definitely not
So
going.
let's say
I
I'm
don't.
gonna
And for folks that are really
set up
into
two
it, I mean, I'm sure that
transmitters
this is
at
the,
500 and 501
Yeah, they're
megahertz.
hanging on every
So
it's definitely
seeing
jumping
these
up. I
intermod
mean, there's
products
more people
of
showing up and
499 and
you know
502.
viewing it.
So really, what that tells me is I
Jeff,
don't want to
Jeff,
put
one F
more
Jeff has
microphones
another
in
streaming
502
media
because of
conference
my
going on right now
those two transmitters
simultaneously.
at
You want
500
to
and 501
We
get
could
close
jump
to each
over.
other.
Yeah,
That could be
absolutely.
causing interference
going on over there?
ones that I
That's what it
I don't
looks
know,
like.
Jeffrey,
The
if you,
software just
I think you have to
automates all this for you.
register
So
for
the
it, but
software
it's
is gonna
free.
calculate
But if you want
your
to,
intermod products.
Jeffrey, if you feel like
And
jumping to,
Guy
work
seems
for
to
you.
have it
So
up.
what
Guy had
software do
something.
oh, Guy, do you
Yeah.
have it up?
Yeah. Can you mute that for a second? Okay, let me see if I I can bring in the audio. Can you guys tell me if you can hear the audio?
Because there was
Can you hear the
no more
audio?
availability in that
There's Jeff.
capacity that they had there. So they were having to spin up new hardware in order to get more people subscribe to it. A lot of us are going that direction, or I've been there for a couple of years, but since we're going that direction, there's so many people pushing that direction. The cloud providers are scrambling right now. And it doesn't matter if it's AWS, Google, or Azure. They're all scrambling to get more hardware implemented in our configurations. Regular CPU based hardware is not that hard to do, but we need GPU in a lot of our instances. And so that's where I've noticed that, especially for the cloud build ups. I mean, we had one client that's using 9 different vmix machines in a cloud cluster, and it was having all kinds of problems because he couldn't start all of them at one time. He couldn't start even a few
Notice
of them.
all the background chatter just
Kind of like sneaking in on it every
dissolved
once in a while.
with the
And
more
finally got them all
interesting
running, and it's all
presentation
fine after
from
that.
Jeff.
Until
we can bring
later in
that
the day,
audio back a
whenever
little
the
bit.
capacity in that node, in that little section of the cloud,
So,
started running out of capacity.
You know, when we go back to March, you know, Zoom was one of the big players early
I think that
on.
my big complaint here is that you have someone talking for a long period of time and you're not getting
their hiccups, right? With their
a close up.
Why are we
have the proper
when he's talking?
there,
You know, we should just be
on both
cutting.
ends,
you know,
but then it came back into favor.
Yeah. It's easier to do gallery.
You know, they've been solving some of the issues
That
there.
would be because they don't
in
have a
general,
Mickey
I would
right
say
now.
they've been very stable.
I have
I've
to
noticed
admit, the
fewer
gallery view
hiccups,
helps a
They don't
lot.
have a
using
Mickey.
them
See the
than my
line.
clients.
Yeah, they don't have a
with
Mickey.
Teams, which
That's
seems to
that's the problem.
They're missing a
sometimes be
Mickey.
down.
Why
Last
is
week
it
it was
small
down
on my
for
screen?
quite a few hours, and that affected
Mickey, I got to he's like, what?
What's the impact of Zoom been on our
The funny
market
thing about the
and
sound
moving
devices
forward?
one
The
is they're
expectations
probably
that
like
producers and
down the
clients are gonna
street from
have.
me.
Cord, do you want to start with
And
that
I
one?
could have went over there
Yeah, I
and
think
taken
that's
care of all
great.
that.
I think that's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
look, Zoom is an amazing
the timing worked out. I was gonna
I
wanted to do it
let's
through our
call a spade
system,
what a spade is,
and I
right?
would have just
We have
done
some
it.
clients
But
who want to use Google Meet, or they want to
I
use
didn't wanna-
Teams, or they want to use something else. But
I think
pretty
part of
much
my
our
problem was is
preferred
that
workflow as far as like,
let's
hey,
go back to
let's
the
all get together and make a show together. Now maybe we might put in
let's
some
go
of the
back 'cause
content,
they're doing
right? So the
Q&A
back
now.
end
Let's just go back
producer
to the,
plays can be for the Zoom, also the guests, the rooms. Like we've created probably like 8 different workflows using Zoom, sometimes as an input source into a switcher, sometimes as an output.
And
I
can
mean,
we kill the
it's
audio
crazy, right?
Why didn't you do it with this show?
So Alex, to Bill's point, the gallery view for me is a panel, and I'm observing the
Yes, it doesn't
engagement
seem
that the other
so.
members are doing.
Folks at NAB are talking
Right,
about
I mean-
ATSC3
Oh, okay, this
using
is
their
all still set
existing
up that way.
UHF TV spectrum
Hey, we've got
primarily.
two presenters.
We'll see once that starts rolling out.
So it's still, but it's not
the
really.
Broadcasters have their licenses for specific, at least
One
the
thing I
US
just
TV
noticed
channels
as
are
we
6
cut away
megahertz
from
channels.
Jeff's event
So
was
that's
the
right now
one of the
ATSC3
presenters suddenly got
versions
a
of that.
lot louder and seemed to
Right.
dominate, and it was to
Potentially
the point where it was
ATSC3
affecting
once they
us,
get all
and
that sorted
everyone
out, but I
was
think
sort
we're
of
gonna
backing
have
away from
several years
cameras.
of
So there's no monitoring
transition
of the
to doing
audio
those
there to
sorts
make
of
sure.
Well, and that's
everybody was
Zoom.
getting
Zoom's
the same
auto
sort of
function. It
experience.
starts quiet and then builds up in auto. So its auto gain has got a really slow attack.
like the username.
It's a good username, right?
Yeah.
Well, and Kim is used to being on audio, but video is not her go-to.
In the 2.4 gigahertz
Right.
range, expect from Wi-Fi or
Yeah, and this is the hard part is looking down at these things, and you really want to set up those monitors right near that camera, so that either in a teleprompter or in a, and this is where you want more people. And this is
It does
this is what
depend a little
Mukana
bit
is kind
on,
of built for,
your
is the
wireless
idea that I
microphone.
take the
It depends a
questions
lot
and she
more
can be
on
looking at a
the
screen or a
Wi-Fi
teleprompter, and
in
that's why there's a
venue that
teleprompter
you're
view,
operating in.
is to
So
send those comments and
I do a lot of
questions through the
stuff in stadiums
teleprompter
and
from
arenas where
the
they've
question
got
system.
an in-house
Makes it
Wi-Fi
easier to
system
make that work.
they've blanketed the entire
I have to
arena
jump
with
off to a meeting.
Wi-Fi antennas
So,
all over the place,
Bill,
so
I'm going to
that
let you guys go.
if you've got
When you
80,000
guys
people
just
in the arena, they
run
can
it
all
out
connect
as far
their
as you want to
smartphones
go,
to
as far as
Wi-Fi.
watching these,
And so
you guys
in
can
an area
discuss
like
it, but I'll
that,
leave
you're
it up
gonna
to
have
you and
a
Mickey.
lot
Mickey, I'm sure,
higher
has to go somewhere at some
level of
point. So,
Wi-Fi or 2.4 gig signal
like,
than
let's take it to 9,
so
but
really,
then after that, you guys
same
have
thing,
to
do your scans,
have to
see
decide what that looks
what
like.
the
Or
local
Mickey can
Wi-Fi
just stay here all
network's
day,
doing, what kind of power
cutting
levels you're
away.
seeing with
I'm
the
sure
local
he doesn't
Wi-Fi
mind.
network. And
9 o'clock's fine. So
if you've
just
only,
watch
you know,
another half
if you're
hour. I don't
already
think we
in
need to
there,
do
like,
more than that.
if I set up
Fair
my
enough.
These
house
things
right
are all
next to a
available.
Turn
local,
your machines to
router,
you.
You don't
and
need
I'm
sleep, Mickey, do you?
not in an apartment
No,
building,
no.
all sorts of other routers in here,
No,
it's
not
gonna
at
be a
all.
very
Yeah, so we'll
different
just take it to
2.4
9,
gig
and then
environment
but
than
just go ahead and
folks
close
that
it
have
out,
an
and I
arena
will
that's
see you
got
all
a stadium
tomorrow.
Wi-Fi system.
And I
So
think tomorrow I
test
will
your
be back to my
scans, look
regularly
what your background
schedule,
level
and
is,
I should be
and
here almost every day
try to
after
figure
that.
out
So
if you can
thanks,
operate
thanks so
your
much. All right, see
system
you guys.
reliably.
Bye, Alex.
Maybe
Take care.
think about
All
something
right.
other than a 2.4
So
gig spectrum device.
we only have the guys off of his shot, so we've only got commentary on the 2 shot now in the original.
Oh yeah. More. Thank you.
But at least he's
For
gone off the
sure.
statistics
And I'll
page.
say, in my experience, using 2.4 gigahertz on set.
Is that still Jeff doing the Zoom or? Yeah, there we go.
Well,
Yes.
she would have had to, or they would have had to resend that. Or Jeff, are you doing the two-person mix, the two windows?
No, I'm doing
No,
the
he's-
two. No, that's Zoom
He's
doing the
just
two windows.
pan and scanning.
Yeah, and there's some streaming video systems that operate.
Bill,
in
what you were saying before about the
2.4 gig with 5
presentation, and
gig
somebody mentioned
ISM
about
band, where you
the
look at
graphics
5
coming
gig
in and
bandwidth.
out. I'm
And so
putting
understanding what other
a
devices
link
are there is
in
really helpful.
Mukana For a bloke that we got to film a presentation for almost a decade ago, Claude Ruel was Michael Schumacher's chassis engineer for Formula One. And that's his own YouTube. Even back then, his grasp of doing this sort of technical presentation was, it was entertaining. It was enjoyable to spend 3 days listening to a man speak, and you never got tired or bored because of what the presenter was able to do.
It does matter.
And he was doing the same thing, slowly revealing the details. It wasn't just a big screen of text.
Wavelength and
It
size
was
of these RF waves
this
initially.
item put up, and then
think
how
about
that relates to
where
the next
a
item,
lower
and so
frequency
forth.
can
It
go
was like
around smaller objects more
storytelling
easily, or
for
educate,
technical
inform, and
presentation.
entertain.
penetrate through walls.
Well,
Yes,
and that's
it was
and,
absolutely
why, like
fantastic.
and Stuart, to
UHF
your
TV
point,
band
when you do
device
when you do your
maybe
road
500
shows, your
megahertz.
automobile shows,
Generally
you
speaking, it
prep
tends to have
all of the
a
graphics
better
ahead of
range
time. You
than
prep all of the
2.4 gigahertz
the
device
roll-ins. You prep
with
all of the pre-roll,
power level.
and then you script
No,
out.
Higher
wi-
frequency, I just tend to think
well,
about as
I
being
yell at a
line of sight.
person who is
Anytime you're
supposed
setting
to
up
do
these
it
wireless
because he
systems,
hasn't
best
done it.
case
And
scenario
he's
is
the
have line of
producer of the
sight
program,
between your
and he'll
antenna
probably
and
be
your
watching this, and I will hear
transmitter
about it
and your
tomorrow.
receiver.
but is it
That's just
my
more
point
true
is a
with the
live
RF
presentation is stacked at the beginning of your show with the production where
We have another question.
a
It's so
documentary
early in
is in
talk.
Oh,
post-production.
they did a split white
Mike Hurst,
color thing. Wow, they
That's
used
Called an
Jeffrey.
RGB going through.
No, that
Jeff,
was
are
Jeffrey.
you doing these, or are they
Yes, yes,
You're doing.
that's Jeffrey.
Can you just leave it out so we can criticize them?
No.
Your general
Also,
frequency
we are
coefficient
getting
rules still
questions
apply.
in the regular
I don't
office hours
understand.
Mukana. I'm gonna
I sometimes tell
bring a
people,
Jump
couple
think
of
about
on.
them.
like a
Yeah.
Go for
multi-lane
it.
highway where
Michael
everybody needs their own
Vospin,
lane
I was
to
talking
operate,
about getting the
right?
audio of two
Gotta be driving
meetings
in your
at
own lane.
once,
So if
and
you've got,
Mukana is showing slides
uh,
from the other show. I think that
lighting
was during the
system that has
transition. I'm not
specific
sure if that's
frequency range,
persistent.
you need to make sure that your audio devices
I
are in a
lost you guys,
different
and I'm
frequency
seeing
range
Guy's
than that,
screen.
so
So
they're
I
not
wonder if the
colliding with each
downstream
other.
of what we're sending is working as normal or something.
Gary, I think that was
Oh,
our last
Jeffrey,
question.
really?
Thanks so much for
I'm
joining
gonna
us today.
put these in
This
answers.
is wrapping up.
All right, we're going to keep it moving here. Our next
No, we're-
presenter is
Oh,
gonna
she's
keep it
hosting.
moving.
Sky,
Yes.
what you were talking about with presetting things
Hello
is like
again.
doing
Hello,
this
and
to my feed.
I want to say one thing is
Sure.
Gary Trenda is full of knowledge, and I always enjoy.
And that's again, that's
panel with
vMix and
him
what have you,
having
and
discussions
virtual
about
things.
all
But
this
having
stuff, so I
the
appreciate
graphics ready to go and having the titles ready to go, there's there's
It's got
ways of having it
pre-production.
all set.
You plan all of
Yeah,
this in advance.
exactly.
It's pre-production.
Live
Yeah.
or recorded. You do record as live.
So Michael is
same
back in
difference.
the with a brand new question. He's still getting an odd display to his side of things, so that might affect what our regular participants are seeing.
Exactly equal.
Is he on headphones
They,
or one of our on speakers?
they should be seeing full screen of Jeffrey's feed, which is the
Yes, that's what he's seeing.
this-
And
the
Jeffrey is
summit.
doing some fun wipes. But that's Jeffrey doing the wipes, not the sound devices.
Send
think
him
he
an
was-
invoice, Jeff.
I think he was just worried somebody hijacked our feed.
Maybe. Jeffrey, could you show us the full interface that they're streaming out?
Have the option to turn off the amplifier.
Look at the checkerboard wipe. So they're just
The
doing
zoom
a
within
two-shot
a
thing.
zoom.
Yeah.
I need falling cows, please, or cheerleaders.
This is
Cheerleader wipe.
interesting if some other
Cheerleader wipe.
service was
And now a
scraping this and
report.
resending it, and then somebody else was rescraping that and resending. It's like a house of cards.
Star wipe.
That's our
Yes, please.
dual channel.
Yes,
Russian
but
dollar
will we get a
video.
YouTube ping for the copyright for having their images on our stream?
That can pick up stereo signals from
And
like
Bill, if
speakers.
it's going
Hopefully
up
our
on saddle,
voiceovers are confusing the track.
It's still on YouTube.
Bill, if the signal goes up on satellite, it might miss the satellite and just go out into space and come back later.
That's true. The people in Alpha Centauri might be
Really,
watching this.
really.
Oh, we've got animation.
Animation.
That's Jeffrey.
That's the
no,
close
it's
of the
not.
show, right? No,
Hi,
no, he's
Carl
coming back.
Winkler here at Electrosonics.
Roll in.
In this video, I'll show you the DCH.
Focus. Focus on the product, not on
Why
him.
do you say in
Focus
this
on the
video?
product.
No, it's a video.
This little thing packs a punch. We designed it to handle
Packs a
stereo
punch.
The script writing getting
When you
in.
say focus, are you talking about the camera
Like from an
focus and the fact that the
M2T
products
or
are
a
out of
DCHT.
focus?
But the
product
DCHR
is
is
out of
also fully
focus.
compatible with mono
Yeah, it's a
transmitters
Yeah.
shallow
from
depth of
D2
field, and the
like the
units in
DBU
front of him are.
DH
Anybody
soft
think they might get a
PR.
cutaway of that desk?
In
I
other
doubt
words,
it.
the
Yeah, I would
DCHR
have kept the focus on his
miniature,
eyes while he's
AA,
talking
or
and then put
externally
in
powered
B-roll
receiver
of
will
the
camera hop or
items.
straight camera
No,
mounted
his
unit
eyes are
And
in
especially
focus.
the
with
items
mono
in
or
his
stereo
hand.
digital digital transmitters. So let's
Now
start
that
by
said,
looking at the
Electrosonics is
outside.
a fine company and they have good products.
There
I'm hearing some speaker back. Somebody's got their speakers too loud.
Receiver, although the DCHR is a little slimmer.
So I've never been to this conference or heard of it. Is this a big deal in the industry?
On the top
I've never heard of
They
Sound
did
Summit
they
either.
did one like back in April or May, and so far, I mean, nothing new has been talked about. At least in the April and May version of the summit.
And who is they? Just a promoter?
It's all sorts of manufacturers of sound gear.
So it's a trade show substitute.
It's got a
Yeah,
3.5
pretty
millimeter
much.
stereo headphone jack. Headphone
This
volume
is either totally out of focus or they're
when the display
upscaling
is on the home screen,
this video.
Just pressing the up and down arrows will change the
Upscaling.
level.
Probably upscaling.
Like the DCHT, DBU,
They showed
No,
it
no,
at
there was a
10.8.
transition
the
that
DCHR can use the
it does
optional
also. This is
LT
pre-produced,
battle
right?
for external
Yes,
DC
correct.
power.
Okay,
This is
this is a
pre-produced.
roll.
This is
in
a roll.
video.
This is a roll-in,
Is the USB jack for firmware updates.
which is
The DCHR
why they
uses the
probably
same
shot at
wire belt
1080,
clip as the DCHT
and then they
LR.
pushed in to get the
So it can be
close-up.
cold shoe
At least it's in
mounted on
focus. The
cameras
product's in focus.
using the LR shoe accessory.
No, it's
Gentlemen,
not.
Is that
I
coming
can't
off
read
the
anything on
YouTube
there.
feed?
All right,
Because
let's get a closer
Now
look
it
at
could
is.
have
the
sworn I
keypad,
saw
home
the
screen, and the
YouTube
menus.
choice for resolution pop
Five-button
up in the
keypad is
bottom
nearly identical
right
to the
corner
one in
about
the
it.
Yeah,
LR.
I was seeing what
Select,
resolution I was at.
back,
Yeah, I was at
power.
1080,
Okay,
the
so that
highest
was
Up
you,
and
one.
not
down
them.
arrow buttons.
Yeah.
Yep.
At the upper left is the RF link light. If lit,
Well,
indicating a recognized
So it's
RF
out of
signal.
focus, and then you've
At the
got
upper
compression
right
on
is
top
the
of
power
that, so
battery
there's no
LED,
chance you're ever
which
going to be
runs
able to see
green
it.
until the
Well, he's
batteries are
got
about
this
2/3
sharp,
depleted,
so there must have
then
been.
turns
He must
red.
have been pushing
When about
something.
10%
That
of
was
the
a
battery life
tabletop.
remains, the
Yeah.
red
That's why I was
LED
wondering
will
if he
blink.
was upscaling it, which apparently he's not.
Here in the home screen, along the top, we see the operating frequency,
Yeah,
I'm
this is
still
not
hearing
gonna work.
somebody's
state,
speaker in the
and the battery
background.
levels of the receiver and transmitter. Just under the operating frequency, we see the channel name, which can be edited in the menu. Below that, we see an RF strip chart showing about 6 seconds of history, a lot like what's in our DSQD
So
receiver.
this is pretty
and wireless
effective. At least
designer
we know
software
where to
monitoring
look and what he's
screen.
talking about when he's
This can
talking
be a
about
handy
it.
feature for troubleshooting. Then to the bottom right
We could
are the
almost
audio
judge
modulation meters.
when they're successful
as
by
I
the
mentioned
amount
earlier,
of comments that we make in the
From the home
background.
screen,
When the volume of
pressing
those
the up
drop,
and down arrows
they're being
adjusts the
effective.
headphone
When we're
volume.
all talking, we're bored.
Let's get into
Right.
the menus. First up, we see the RF setup, and if we press the menu select button again, we can manually set the operating frequency, use SmartTune for automatic frequency
So the irony
selection,
for our
or
viewers
scan the local
is,
RF and choose
I
our
mean,
own
for the
frequency
office
that
hour
way.
viewers, is both audios
The
are
group setup
driving me
lets us
nuts.
manage frequency
So
groups,
our talking
which
over
can
their
then be
talking
transferred over infrared to other
for
devices that have the group
for
tuned
the
function.
office hours audience
Next in
is
the
very
main menu
confusing.
is audio setup.
Yeah, but it essentially
Starting
says
with
what
output
Alex is
level,
trying to do
allowing
with
us to
the movie
adjust
and the
from plus
coffee
5
challenge,
dBu
things
down to
like
minus
that. This
50
is how
in
you
1
get
dB steps.
engagement by
We can also send a 1K tone to the
doing
next
a
device in the
script,
chain, like a camera
making
or
it
recorder
work,
to calibrate levels
and
exactly.
focusing on what you're telling people about, so that the
Compatibility
sound
modes let us choose between
reinforces
Duet
vision,
unencrypted,
and it's
DCHX
congruent for
encrypted,
the
and
viewer.
D-square digital transmission
That's what we
modes.
did for the last 2 days
Output
in
type
Discord,
gives
and
us
it was
analog
awesome.
or AES3,
Mhm.
and the audio
I
polarity
think it might
allows
be
us to
worth a
invert the
second
signal
hour
if need
one
be.
day going through how to
The
lay
sync
out a
and encryption
production,
menu allows us to send the
just to
operating
give everybody a
frequency
kind of
over
route map
infrared,
script to
send
work
all
from,
settings,
and then how to
get the
break a
frequency
script
from a
down for
transmitter,
shots.
or get
Sign
all
me up.
settings.
Sign me up,
Key type
Kev.
selection allows us to choose between the
Yeah,
universal
all
key,
those stages,
common to
treatment,
all our encrypted
scripting, all
units,
of those things
shared
had
key, which
purposes,
is
and they
handy when
really
you need more
do
than one receiver
end
to
up
have the
with
key,
better
the standard mode, which
results
is
at
highly
the
secure,
end of a
only allowing one
process.
receiver to have the
Period.
key,
Full stop.
or volatile, the most secure of all. This is the one-time use type of key. If a transmitter loses power, it needs to be resynced. If the receiver loses power, a new key must be generated. Then, if you're in any key management mode other than universal, you'll see the make key, wipe key, and send key functions. For a fuller explanation of the different types of key management policies, check out my video on the D-squared encryption choice and setup.
Yeah, good job with the
The
video
tools and
production,
settings
at least.
menu offer the lock-unlock function.
So
allowing
I am
you to
also
prevent
watching
changes
it
to the unit
on
by
my
the front panel.
iPhone.
The transmitter battery type
What's the
and
experience
display,
like, Sky?
the receiver battery type and display.
It's very
The
sharp,
display
very
itself
crisp.
can be reversed or normal, call.
Yeah,
or the
that's one thing
display
about
backlight
iPhones, and
timeout
I
can be
assume
chosen
Androids
as
too.
well.
Their screens are so
You
much
can
better
also
now
edit
that
the
you
name
can
of the
see things
receiver
like
and the
small
transmitter.
text up close really
Yeah,
well.
right.
PAL function
I can
relates
read
to
it.
That's
how
the
much of
importance of the
PCHR's
cameraman doing his
frequency
job
bandwidth
correctly.
will show in a
I'm
scan
actually
when using
preferring watching movies later at
North
night if my
American setting
wife
does not
has
allow
an early
10
morning, and so I'm
7
going
614
to the
megahertz
living
to be
room
used.
to watch content.
With
I'll
the
do
EU
it on my
setting,
phone
these frequencies
in
can be
preference to the big
This will
screen
match the
TV
available
there.
tuning ranges in the
I
transmitters
find
sold in
the
these different
actual
regions.
experience more personal.
The
Well,
About screen
Rosco,
shows you the
isn't
unit's
there an
currently
inch
loaded firmware versions.
inch per
Then
distance
finally, the unit can
thing
be
that
returned to factory default
1
Degree
inch
per arc, degrees per arc
Okay, let's
angle.
do a quick setup
Yeah, what
using
is that?
DCHT
What is
transmitter.
that?
Of human resolution, I'd have to look at human eye
I'm
resolution.
going
I
to
have to
use
look
the
it up
smart
again. It's
tuning
from the
function to
MIT
choose the
Media
best
Lab.
frequency for this
Yeah,
location.
they're charts.
And that's
Look how
why when
quickly
you
it does
put
the
goggles
scan.
on, they
Once it's
fake
done,
a
it
certain
presents us with
distance
the option
because
to
they
use the IR sync to set the
they know
transmitter.
you're only six
If I
or you're only
remember,
Hold the
go
infrared
ahead.
windows close to each other and
if I
fire
remember
away.
rightly from the days of
Once
analog
that's done,
TV,
I'll
it's
turn on my
something
DCHT
like
transmission and we're good to go.
4
The
times the
RF
height
link
of the
light came
screen
on,
back
there is
from the
RF activity
screen.
in the meter,
I
and we
would
can
literally
see
need to
audio
dig out
modulation.
textbooks to find it.
And
Another
I'm going to
method
go
would
back
be
and
to
thank
manually
Steve
enter
Jobs
a
for being
frequency from a
so
list, or do an
obsessive
RF
about
scan,
size
and
and
then
weight.
tune the
Because
receiver
remember
manually.
the old story about dumping the
As you
product
can
into a
see,
bucket
this
of
little
water, and when
receiver is
the
a flexible
bubbles
and
came
powerful
out, he
tool
was
for a
saying,
wide variety of applications.
whatever that
Camera
air
op
was
use
hiding in, I want
for
you to
small
get rid of
cameras
it.
or even for the
When
bag.
you have something that's
Powerful
as
encryption
small and
can
as
be used
light
in
as
4 different key
possible,
policies depending on the
that
application.
means you
And
people use
setup
it for
is
stuff like
extremely
I'm going to
quick and
hold it
easy.
in front of my
For more
face
information,
for 2
check out the
hours to
product
watch a
details at
movie.
electrosonics.com.
And so
I'm
it
Carl Winkler.
made
Thanks for watching.
long-term sense.
Well, also that's your eye. What's the big giant screens? What am I thinking? What am I saying here?
Joined
That
now
they
again by Carl from Electrosonics.
sorry.
LED walls, the big giant.
No. The theatrical, the big giant theatrical. IMAX.
Oh, IMAX.
IMAX, the concept that I understood was instead of 360, it went to your peripheral. And so they made it as big so that in relationship and why you'll see these big globe theaters is so that, and they're tiered, is that you all have the same distance to your peripheral immersiveness.
Yeah, the field of view.
Yes.
I'm a little late getting in. What's he discussing? A frequency counter?
RF. It's an RF transmitter.
Looks like
or
a
receiver.
frequency counter.
I want to
Lithium
discuss the
engineer.
Picasso print over his show, which is not like it.
That's a really big unit.
And then there's a couple questions.
Here, this will scare you. Each eye has a horizontal field of view of 150 degrees, 60 degrees towards the nose and 90 degrees to the side.
There you go.
TMI.
Nice.
This is about all we could fit in there.
But I also knew there was at one time how many inches of screen per how many humans watching. So
we
like
want
in
to
a
check in
conference
on
room.
Guy and Jeff Keithley and see what we're seeing there as opposed to the still shot.
Experience to kind of bring that vibe back to music fans who can't really get it right now.
It's fascinating because this is not something that these workflows, right, that we probably would have envisioned a few months ago as being something we want to do. Why would we want to bring people watching at home into our live production? But now it's that fan side experience that's so important. I mean, you know, back to hockey, I was watching NHL games and there's no fans in the stands. And I mean, they had to be innovative because they were realizing the pucks were ending up on the canvas that was covering the seats. And so that they were having people using actually pool nets.
Jeffrey, to watch you,
really
to be the
funny
fly
when
on
they
the
were
wall
straight
and watch you
after
work, Jeffrey,
practices.
was awesome. So that was cool. Thank you.
You know, the same type of innovations coming into some of our productions. I mean, Corey, you talked a bit about some of your experiences there.
That was, by the way, that is.
one of the
Go ahead,
things
Sky.
that
Well,
last
but Jeffrey, by the way, and as we were talking about Rosco,
so the sommeliers are
all of my learning has been hard knocks, is getting in there and figuring it out with, from people that have been doing it. So I'm very fortunate to be
I
in this room.
hate the fact I have to do this through Zoom, and you have a lot of things to figure out. Like for instance, that yellow box that goes around, the name, the who's muted, who's coming into a meeting, who's leaving a meeting, and pop-ups and everything. It's just horrible. But you have to do it.
So a really neat workflow, whereas before everyone just be packed in one big room, food and wine would be flowing
Now, Jeff,
in.
you could
designer
theoretically
somewhere
And here we were with
push in on the entire group
multiple
view
different
so we didn't have so
locations, all
much black
connected via
space
Zoom
and
and
they
then
weren't
streamed out to a live audience
floating
there.
so much in space,
Jeff,
right?
what innovative workflows have you seen on your end?
Would definitely
How's the level? Do I need to bring it up, or how's it
Most
sound?
of our, we've actually been doing remote production
sounded
for
pretty
a
good.
couple of years
Sounds
now.
good.
We use
It's
robotic
good.
cameras. We started with robotic camera. Actually, started with graphics about
Guy,
6
your
or
audio was
7 years ago,
overdriven.
and that was an easy one to remote.
Sorry, I'm trying to
and we're
run the
giving them
faders here
feedback
on
that the
the
graphics
ATEM
office
software
just sitting
control,
at home,
and
just
it's not
chasing
fun.
the scores. Then we were able to move to
Do you
automated
think
scores.
ATEM's going to come
Actually
out
made
with
it
a
a little bit
mini
easier for
audio
everything. But
mixing
then as
panel
we
to plug in?
kept moving forward, they just kept
I
coming
could use
back in. It's like, well, why can't we do
command,
more? So we invested
central
in the
command,
Mark Roberts
and
robotics
a
cameras,
MIDI
which are
device. If you
all
guys haven't
IV
seen that
based
software,
to
it looks
start
really
with. So
cool.
we
You can
started
get like
with,
a
let's
$100
get the
MIDI
guys
device,
off the courts
and then
where it could be anywhere
you'd
from
have
100
physical
to
control.
120
But
degrees
right
of
now, I'm trying to
it
do
was
this
just
with
brutal
those little
inside.
ATEM
And of course, we
controls,
were
and
everywhere
it's
it
not
was hot.
fun.
So once we got the guys off
Alexa.
the
This is where a
courts,
software
truck,
switcher
and of
really
course it's
comes in,
IP
because
based,
what
and
I
all
could
this
do
time
is I could
in mind, I'm
actually
thinking,
zoom in on all
why
5 of
why
those
aren't we
and
doing
set up
this somewhere
separate
else?
scenes
And so
for
we
each
started
one, and then just
pushing
switch
it
back and
and
forth.
started pushing the envelope a lot.
Ah,
And we got
but there's not that
to where
much
we could
resolution, right?
very
That's the
efficiently just
thumbnail
distribute
delivery,
our
so that's going to
workflow
be
throughout the
a couple
country.
hundred
So we do
pixels or
mostly
300 or
all
400
North
pixels
American
wide.
events, basically U.S. and Canada.
Is Jeff?
We used to do
Won't have Jeff
a lot of
hosting this
events in
meeting by
Mexico
chance?
also. But whenever we're sending
Still
out
is.
guys, I might
Mickey's
have
the
This one
guys
is a
in
web.
co-host.
Atlanta,
This
Fort
one
Wayne, Indiana.
that we're
I've
watching
got
is a
a guy in
webinar,
Kentucky,
and I'm just pushing
and
out
then
the
my
app
guys,
from the iPad,
where
so you
we're
can see if
taking
I
shifts and we're
highlight, if I
taking
touch the
not
screen,
only
that
shifts, but
I'm
always
actually in
taking
that webinar.
rotation
So
between who's
I'm just
out this
pushing it, and
week,
that's why
who's
we're
out
getting
the
the black
next week,
bars again,
etc.
because I don't
We
have
may have
that app in
anywhere
there.
from 4, 5, 6, as many as 7 or 8 events on a weekend, but we're able to spread out to a freelancer base and also to our full times and get them a better quality of life because they
Put
don't
sound
have to travel
devices
so
on
much.
mine,
So we
so
were
you can
we were
look
already
back
doing
and forth.
this was well before COVID.
See, right there, he made
But
a point, and
it
you saw
allowed us,
everybody
because we
nodding,
had
which
that
really
technology already
emphasizes
in
that
place,
the other
allowed us
professionals
very quickly to pivot
agree
and say,
with his
okay, let's
point.
start
That's
doing
something
some
we
remote
mix when we're
production.
constantly on
We can send out
close-ups.
camera kits with one EIC. That's only all his job is there is
Okay,
to set
somebody's
up stuff and put
recommending
out
that
fires. That's
I'm
it.
going to do a screen
And
grab
then
of my
maybe
screen
have a
grab
second for
of
him if you wanted to,
Guy's
but
screen
a
grab
couple
and
guys could go out,
broadcast.
set up a complete show, and then everybody else could be completely
What,
remote.
5 deep?
And it's a phenomenal workflow once you work it out. There's a lot of us, not just in, and
We've
I'm
got
not
a
a
question
huge
from F and
broadcaster
Dunn
by any
saying,
means, but
Jeff,
you know,
2F
it
Jeff,
pains
do you
me to
find
see 4
yourself
trucks
using
sitting
the
in the back.
floating home button on your
But
iOS device
whenever
often, and
when
if
we
so,
do
in what
have
process?
events, it just makes me smile whenever you can just say,
Oh, Jeff isn't
hey,
here.
can you take over for a little bit and walk away? And if you need to take a bio break or whatever, you can walk away and you know that the show's still running perfectly fine because we're either doing the switching on site or we're doing the switching in the cloud. It doesn't matter. It's being done and it's running fine because of a distributed workflow. So that's the big change that we've seen. And I don't think it's going to change anymore moving forward. I think we're going to see a hybrid combination of production moving forward. There's going to be people on site.
Oh,
but there's
Evan
not
said
gonna
it was
be as
whoever
many
was
people.
pushing
A big
this
truck rolling on
content,
site's not
and
gonna
we
have
have no
20 or
idea
30
who's
anymore.
originally sending
It's
it.
gonna
Guy
be
is
half that or maybe even
restreaming it through his system
They're
here.
definitely very optimized.
Yeah, this
workflows
is
that,
streaming
we're
media's
entering
event,
into here.
and I'll put a link in the chat so
I'm
everybody
going to
can
ask you guys about the
register if
presidential
they want.
stuff very shortly there, but I did want to ask
Thank you.
Ali on a related note there. I mean, we were
Did-
talking about
did you have-
Russian,
I think I tried to
hackers
log in
there
last night and there were different
you know, them
breakout
entering into the
rooms.
workflows.
Guy, did you have to go to this
What
one
do
or
you
is
guys
this the
do with
keynote
that?
for the whole?
You know, what are some of the
Because there's
techniques and
like a
the
3-day
tools at your
event.
disposal to
And
try to
Yeah, it
stop
looks like
that
that there's
spread,
different.
that
It looks
piracy,
like
you
there's
know, the
different
Russian
sessions,
influence
and each one has its own unique
stopped the last
webinar
election there, but,
ID.
you know,
Ah,
can
So you have
help
to
us
register
out?
for whichever one you want to attend.
Yeah,
There's
so
different
again,
sessions
I'm
all day.
very focused
Ooh, the
on
other one's gone
distribution to
vertical
the
video.
subscribers, right? And so we're gonna talk about when there is a live streaming.
That's weird.
specifically
Oh no,
exposed,
now
for
they're
example,
out of vertical
or
video back to the
anything
woman host.
related to live events. How can you identify the pirate sites bytes and shut it down. So there are really two steps here. First step is to
I think they're doing recorded video right now.
technologies like digital fingerprinting, which are used for automatic
Geez, I'm seeing.
automatic
I do
content
dislike this fact that
recognition,
when
VCR,
anything gets
that
pinned,
are
it knocks you
actually
back out of the
used to
gallery into
identify if the content is licensed to a
standard
specific
mode.
entity. So
Yeah,
when
they're
you
doing
see a
product
pirated
stuff on the
thing,
other one.
first you gotta see who that content which is being pirated from is, and
Yeah, I think I may come away with the fact that if, all things being equal, I'd release to the gallery view a little more than I think I'd been doing in the past when I have to figure it out. I like the interaction between the rest of the panel. So I'd use that as a release shot. Just close, then pop back out, then go in.
Hey, Bill, on Makana, we do have a couple more questions.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, let me move them over. Highlight. Okay, both audios are driving me nuts.
Sorry.
That's all right. No problem. Jeff Dunn, do you find yourself using the floating home button now? We asked that before. Both audios are driving me nuts. It was to whomever was pushing this content, and I think we just. So does Guy use the floating home button often? Guy, I don't hear Guy. Is Guy frozen?
I use it on all my devices.
He's streaming out the other talk.
Yeah, he's in the other seminar, isn't he?
You know, I hate to say it, but one of my biggest struggles is orientation of what is on my screen and what am I touching, particularly in messaging. I get these notification banners and I'm going, what service do I go to engage with that person? I've got so many message sources and so many email accounts.
Well, I was just envisioning a 3-ring circus, and that was the content of things happening in 3 different rings to entertain you. But I don't know where that, as you were saying, there's so much content coming at us now.
Yeah, only a 12 and 13-year-old can parse that many different sources feeding their brains at one time. Jeffrey had something, and I want to go back to Guy. But Jeffrey,
what would be really cool is if they did it like the NFL. If you've ever gone to the like DirecTV or something like that, and they have all the games running, and then you just select one of the games. So I could select, let's say, they're talking about DPAs on sound devices, and I wanted to see that. I just select on that, and all of a sudden that would come to the big screen with the sound and everything like that, while the other ones stay low. And then it's like, oh, I want to see what Jeff Keithley's going to say. Click on that, and it switches over just for me, as opposed to, yeah.
Right.
That would be cool.
The problem is then persistence of vision. The metrics of watching the original thing go down every time somebody leaves and goes to look at something else. And so you're going to have to figure out how Google or whomever can track how many things you got, and are you watching any of them, or it messes up all the advertising.
That's cable TV for the last 30 years.
Yeah,
we've had
too many
500
sources.
Yeah, they have a show on I think it's one of the ESPNs or something. It's called the Hot Zone, and basically they cut in on the best plays. If there's a conference or something, maybe they could cut in on when somebody's saying something really interesting, or something like that.
That'd be interesting. I mean, they'll figure it out sooner or later. Guy, somebody was asking while you were out for a minute, does Guy use the floating home button often?
I actually do, so I keep it up. I didn't realize that it was coming out the supposedly clean HDMI, so it actually kicks that little floating home button. If you guys didn't see it, it's a little round circle on there.
Okay. So
that was that round button on the top right?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was from the video.
Well, we're at 8:52. We need to close this off at 9, but if we don't have, I mean, does anybody else see anything about or have any subjects about what we've been watching that they find?
Well, again, for the audience that was watching this, the concept that we just did was the from that 2000 something 2000. What's that? The video where you would watch old time videos with the audience in the front, and they would be commenting on it. Mystery Science Theater 2000. There it is. Finally dug it out. So
the only difference, Guy, is that we didn't have the silhouette shadowy heads in the foreground, people looking at.
I did, Paul. You didn't see them?
No, I missed that. I was out for a while.
It was on my feed.
I'm wondering if I kick off my backlight, whether I could do it. No, that's the kicking off the key. I still have too much spill.
So I'm going to show you really quick. This is what I did to make the Zoom room into a conference style video. And let me just resize this so you can see the whole thing. And so these were separate screens, and I did a 3-shot shoot. The lower third is always going to stay on the bottom in this case, and audio is always going to be horrible because they just don't listen to the recommendations of mics that we choose. But as you can see, that doesn't look like a Zoom presentation, and it's all done through Zoom.
You know, when I was a little kid, I live not far from a golf course. I used to wander over for golf tournaments. They used to sell these vertical boxes that had a mirror at the top and a mirror at the bottom, and it was for short folks, and I was a short kid, to watch over the heads of the adults to be able to see them. I think we need that for our Zoom
Periscope.
cameras. A little Zoom periscope that gets the camera up so that you're not always that laptop shot. Go ahead, Rosco.
Jeffrey, when you say it's not a Zoom presentation, are you saying that they're not using some sort of presentation tools built by Zoom?
No, it's basically two screen. I have the presenter on the main screen, and then I have the presentation on the second screen, and then I'm screen scraping both of those. But I'm just saying that it doesn't look like it's coming from Zoom, and I do my best to make sure that any type of markings that Zoom would put on there is not seen by the average person.
Oh, okay. So, you're
just
fixing it to not look like a Zoom presentation. Yeah,
just
gotcha.
like with Skype. Whenever I had to do a Skype presentation, I would make a interface or a layer that would actually cover the Skype logo.
Of course.
They don't pay for this video. They're not sponsoring this video. They're just, and I paid for Skype, and I still get this watermark, and that's what really sucked.
We're kind of out of the normal flow, but Effin did come in with another question. Have you all looked at the Moment lens adapter to add lenses to your laptop camera? You can, and I think a lot of people use them. I don't think they have a periscope, which is what I was talking about. That would be a very cool aftermarket thing if anybody wants to do about a 10-inch periscope. So I guess.
Bill, I think an easier idea would be actually talk to the manufacturers and have a slide that comes up with the webcam on it from the manufacturer itself. So
piece of aluminum that goes down the back of your laptop that just comes up and telescopes up.
Okay, I don't mean to be bizarre, but you literally, other than a teleprompter, do you think someone's going to put a camera right in the middle of the laptop screen?
You know, with this surface mount stuff, I would imagine that somebody will be clever enough eventually to figure out a way to print a camera inside the LED array.
Well, they've already got under screen cameras on mobile phones now.
Yeah. But that's the problem. I mean, we're mostly looking down naturally.
Absolutely.
So I'm on a little bit of a riser, so I could, raise the edge of my laptop up somewhat higher, but I think I'm still looking down. And so my camera is at least 10 inches above the top rim of my laptop, and that seems to look more natural, and it's less shooting up at me.
Well, when I tore my rig apart, which I have to do today once I leave here. We're going to be shooting all weekend, but I got it just 6 inches too high, and so now I'm looking at a lot of eyebrow and a lot of. So I just want to bring it down as close as I can to the monitor.
There is another simpler solution for changing the level of the subject in the camera.
Which is
the chair. Oh, he's got his hydraulic chair.
The best part about doing IT enterprise people is I tell them, hey, you got a certification book, don't you? Put it underneath your laptop.
Your audio went away.
Yeah, you've gone very clippy.
Yeah, somebody liked this question. Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
I would like to point out there was actually a Chinese laptop manufacturer that was putting the webcam underneath the F9 key in the keyboard. So you could actually push the webcam down for privacy. Their whole point was if you had a young girl who had the webcam and what have you, somebody who hacks her website or laptop wouldn't be able to see anything because the camera would fold flat. That laptop was very quickly banned by the FBI in the US.
Go figure. Actually, we had another question come in. Has anybody put a camera on a stalk in front of a larger monitor? So any kind of a telescoping thing or something to put the camera in front of a big screen. Has anybody tried that? I mean, it seemed like it would be a kludgy kind of a solution.
So you put it on one of those poles that, I mean, yeah, there it is. Stuart's doing it.
Does that count? Because that's a camera on a tripod head sitting on top of the IP adapter on top of my speakers.
But are you reading office hours? Yeah, you are, because there I am back there. Okay.
Yeah, I've got Mukana there, Discord there. That's the second screen, and the one behind it is the NDI viewer, just so that I've got the audio levels, which is actually, I'll just move that one out of the way a bit. So the audio levels are just there, just in my eye line, so that I don't end up blasting everybody's ears again. I'm just watching the levels to make sure I don't do that.
Hey, Stuart, what model Dells are those monitors? Can you read the model number?
That's
Wait a second. I'm gonna step in for a second because Alex is expecting to come back and shut the feed down at 9 o'clock, which means that we're only a minute away. So these things, all remember these questions. We're going to come back. We're going to make sure that when he looks and wants to cut it off, it is cut off. So thank you all for attending today. We truly appreciate it. Mickey, if you have the closing thing together. Good. We're going to hit it on top of the hour. It's 9 o'clock right now. Thank you all for coming. We will see you all tomorrow on the next edition of Office Hours. Don't forget, tomorrow, Saturday, is another education day. So if you're an education related, then come here and talk to everybody. Bye, one and all.
Great job, Bill. Great job.